Hey everyone, tonight we are going to curl up with a story you think you know, but probably don't. We're going to trace the long, winding, and frankly, quite smelly journey of one of the world's most beloved foods. We're talking about sushi. And your sleek, modern California roll with its perfect avocado and delicate crab began its life in a way that is almost unrecognizable. A way that involves months, even years, of waiting a powerful aroma of decay, and a process that was more about survival than about a delightful dining experience. It's a history lesson that starts in the humid, muddy wetlands of Southeast Asia, and honestly, given the lack of refrigeration and the rather adventurous preservation techniques, you probably won't survive this meal in its original form. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. For those of you settling in for the night, I'd love to see where you're watching from and what time it is for you, so drop a comment down below. For my podcast listeners, a follow and a like helps the channel more than you know and ensures you won't miss the next part of our journey. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself standing not in a pristine, minimalist Japanese restaurant, but knee-deep in the warm, murky waters of a vast river delta. The air is thick, clinging to your skin like a second layer of clothing. It's heavy with the scent of wet earth, crushed vegetation, and the sweet, cloying aroma of tropical blossoms, fighting a losing battle against the ever-present smell of mud and life and decay. This is the Mekong River, perhaps, or another of the great life-giving arteries of Southeast Asia thousands of years ago. The sun beats down a relentless hazy orb in a milky sky, and the drone of insects is a constant hypnotic soundtrack to your every moment. Your life here, your survival, is tied to the rhythm of the water, the flooding monsoons, and the dry receding seasons. And most importantly, it's tied to the bounty of the river itself, the fish. You spend your days with the current casting nets or guiding simple wooden boats through the labyrinthine channels. The catch is good. The water teems with freshwater fish, wriggling and flashing silver as you pull them from their world into yours. This is your protein, your sustenance. But here lies the great pressing problem of your existence. In this sweltering, relentless heat, a dead fish is a ticking clock. Spoilage isn't a matter of days, it's a matter of hours. The very air that gives you life is working tirelessly to reclaim this vital food source, to break it down and return it to the cycle of the swamp. You have more fish than your family can eat in a single day or even a single week. To simply have it rot would be a catastrophic waste, an insult to the river spirits, and a direct threat to your family's future. You need a way to make it last. You've tried drying it in the sun, of course. Sliced thin and laid out on woven mats, the fish can be preserved, but the monsoon season can make that impossible for weeks on end. You've tried smoking it over slow-burning fires, which works well, but requires constant fuel and attention. But there is another way, an older way. It's a strange and subtle magic, a partnership with the invisible world. It's the magic of fermentation. You watch the village elders, their hands gnarled but impossibly deft, as they begin the process. They take the caught fish carp, perhaps, or gourami, and gut them, scale them. They are then packed carefully, not with salt, which might be a rare and precious commodity, traded from distant coastal towns, but with cooked rice. You understand the rice. It is the other pillar of your diet, grown in vast terraced paddies that mirror the sky. But this use is different. The fish are stuffed with rice, then layered in large wooden tubs or clay pots, more cooked rice, packed in between each layer, pressing down firmly to squeeze out any pockets of air. Finally, a heavy stone is placed on top, a weight to seal the contents from the corrupting influence of the open air. And then you wait. This is not the impatient waiting of a modern kitchen timer. This is the slow, seasonal waiting of an agricultural life. The pots are stored in a cool, dark place, perhaps under the raised floor of your stilt house. For months, the contents of that pot are left to their own devices. And inside, a silent, powerful transformation is taking place. The rice begins to ferment. It doesn't rot in the way you'd expect. Instead, the starches in the rice break down, creating lactic acid. The environment inside the pot becomes increasingly acidic, a sour pickling bath that works to preserve the fish. It cures the flesh, breaks down its proteins, and protects it from the microbes that would cause putrefaction. It's a controlled decay, a managed decomposition that turns a perishable food into something that can last for a year or even longer. The smell when the pot is finally opened is something you're not quite prepared for. It's intensely sour, pungent, and deeply fishy. It's a smell that would make a modern health inspector weep and possibly faint. But to you, it is the smell of security. It is the smell of food for the lean season. The fish, when you pull it from the pot, is soft, almost paste-like in texture, with a flavor that is overwhelmingly sour and savory, an umami bomb forged by time and microbes. And the rice. You scoop it out and discard it. Its job is done. It has given its essence, its fermenting power to the fish. It is now just a sour, mushy, inedible byproduct. The idea of eating this pungent fermented rice would seem utterly bizarre, like eating the wrapping paper instead of the candy bar, a rookie mistake. This preserved fish, this Narezushi, in its most primordial form, is what you eat. You might have a small piece with your fresh, fluffy steamed rice, its sour power, a potent condiment. This is the true, humble origin of sushi. Not a delicacy, but a necessity. Not an art form, but a brilliant, if rather fragrant piece of folk science. It was a solution born of heat, humidity, and the universal human need to outsmart the relentless march of time. Historians still argue whether the practice began with freshwater fish from inland rivers like this one, or if it was adapted from techniques used on saltwater fish by coastal communities who had more access to salt. It's likely that variations existed in many places, a shared discovery of how to make the perishable permanent. These people weren't trying to invent a global phenomenon. They were just trying to ensure they'd have something to eat next season. They were playing the long game, a kind of culinary 4D chess that we, with our instant pot dinners and vacuum-sealed leftovers, can barely comprehend. This process, this patience, this intimate understanding of natural transformation, this is the seed. And for this seed to grow into the sushi, we know it would first need to take a long, slow journey out of these humid wetlands and across the sea to a new land, a new culture that would take this simple, practical idea and begin to shape it into an art. That seed of an idea, that clever trick of preserving fish in fermenting rice, does not stay confined to the humid riverbanks where you first encountered it. Ideas, especially good ones, have a way of traveling. They don't move like a person on a direct journey, striding purposefully from one point to another. They move more like pollen on the wind, or like a whispered story passed from one traveler to the next, changing just a little with each telling. This wasn't a simple case of downloading a recipe. It was more like a game of telephone played over centuries and across several hundred miles of open water, drifting north from Southeast Asia, seeping into the culinary traditions of southern China. And from there, it takes a boat. You are no longer in the sweltering lowlands. The air has changed. It's cooler, laced with the sharp, clean scent of salt and sea spray. You find yourself on a wooden ship, not a grand vessel, but a sturdy trading junk, its sails full of wind as it plies the waters of the East China Sea. You are surrounded by merchants' monks and emissaries. They carry precious cargo, shimmering silks, intricate ceramics, and scrolls filled with philosophy, poetry, and new ways of thinking. And packed away in the hold, nestled amongst the more glamorous goods, are the humbler, more practical ideas. New farming techniques, advances in metallurgy, and yes, methods of keeping food from spoiling. This ship, and hundreds like it, are headed east, toward an archipelago, a string of mountainous islands that are eagerly, almost desperately drinking in the culture of the mainland. You are heading to the land of Wa, to ancient Japan. As the shores of Japan come into view, you see a landscape that is both familiar and strikingly different. There are rice paddies, yes, meticulously carved into the coastal plains and valleys. But beyond them, mountains rise sharply, their slopes thick with dark green forests of cedar and pine. The climate is temperate, with 4 distinct seasons, a world away from the unending summer of the Mekong. You arrive in the 8th century during a period history will later call the Nara period. Japan is forging its first strong centralized state, and its capital city, Heijokyo, which we now know as Nara, is the heart of this great project. The city is a marvel, a carefully planned grid of avenues and streets modeled directly on the grand capital of Tang, China. Immense Buddhist temples reach for the sky, their tiered pagodas and sweeping tile roofs, symbols of a powerful new faith that has also been imported from the continent. You walk the wide boulevards, dodging ox carts and courtiers dressed in colorful layered robes. You hear the rhythmic chanting of monks and the clatter of artisans' workshops. The whole city hums with a vibrant energy, a sense of ambition. Much like a modern city suddenly obsessed with a new kind of coffee or a strange new exercise fad, Nara-era Japan was hungry for all things continental. A new writing system, new political structures, new philosophies, all were being enthusiastically adopted and adapted by the Japanese elite. And with them came new foods. The technique of fermenting fish in rice arrives here not as some revolutionary new invention, but as just one small part of this massive wave of cultural importation. It likely wasn't even seen as a dish in its own right, but simply as a practical Chinese method for handling fish. For the Japanese, it made perfect sense. You're in a nation of islands surrounded by the sea. Fishing is a cornerstone of life. You're also in a nation of rice farmers. Rice is the currency, the staple, the bedrock of the entire society. A technique that uses your most abundant crop to preserve your second most abundant food source. It's a natural fit. So you watch as the method takes root in this new soil. The process is much the same as the one you saw before. The fish caught from the plentiful streams or the nearby sea is salted, then packed into jars with cooked rice and left to undergo that same slow, magical transformation. The Japanese, however, were already masters of a different kind of fermentation. For centuries, they had used a special mold, koji, to create wonders like sake and the rich pastes of miso and soy sauce. This new method, using the natural lactic acid from rice, was a different but complementary branch of food science. It wasn't an alien concept, but a novel application of a principle they already understood deeply, that with a little patience you could coax nature into making your food not only last longer, but also more flavorful. When this pungent sour fish first showed up, it was probably met with the same mix of curiosity and suspicion as your grandparents trying a kale smoothie for the first time. It was foreign, it smelled strange, and it was a far cry from the fresh grilled fish that was a staple of the daily diet. But its utility was undeniable. It could turn a seasonal glut of fish into a year-round resource. Historians still argue whether this culinary technique arrived directly from southern China or perhaps followed a more roundabout path through the Korean peninsula, with each culture adding its own subtle twist along the way. The evidence is sparse, lost in the unrecorded transactions of fishermen and traders. But what is clear is that by the time Nara was in its full glory, this preserved fish, now beginning its life as Narezushi, was here to stay. It wasn't a food for everyone yet. It was likely still a specialty, a way for inland communities to enjoy seafood or a preserved ration for soldiers and travelers. Its journey in Japan was just beginning. It had found a new home, a culture that would, over the next 1,000 years, slowly forget the food's foreign origins and begin the long, patient process of making it entirely its own. The trail of our story, which began in the mud of the Mekong and flowed across the sea, now goes cold. It disappears from the docks and the farmers' fields and moves indoors into the quiet, lamp-lit halls of government. You are now inside one of the grand, dark-timbered buildings of the Nara court. The air is cool and smells of cedar wood ink and old paper. The boisterous energy of the city streets has been replaced by a hushed, formal reverence. Here, an army of scribes and bureaucrats is busy with the immense task of running an empire. They are counting, recording, and codifying every aspect of life in this emerging nation. And it is here, in their meticulous, almost obsessive record-keeping, that we find our first solid clue. You're not looking through a cookbook. No one, as far as we know, was writing down recipes for common folk just yet. Instead, you are looking at the foundational documents of the state. Your eyes scan the delicate, deliberate brushstrokes on a long scroll of paper. This is a copy of the Euro Code, a vast collection of laws and administrative statutes first compiled in the year 718. You're not exactly reading a thrilling adventure story. This is the 8th century equivalent of an Excel spreadsheet filled with tax codes, civil regulations, and commodity lists. It's dry, methodical, and for most people, incredibly dull. But buried deep within its columns, nestled between entries for silk threads, iron tools, and bushels of rice, is the evidence you've been seeking. You see the character for fish, followed by a series of other characters. Some denote the type of fish, others a specific preparation. And there, unmistakable to the scholar's eye, is a term for fish packed and preserved with rice. It's listed as an acceptable item for paying your taxes to the central government. This is it. This is the first time the ancestor of sushi appears in writing in Japan. It's no longer just a hypothetical import or a folksy preservation method. It is now officially a recognized commodity, an item with a value so stable and understood that the imperial court would accept it in lieu of currency. It has a line item on the national budget. It's comforting in a strange way to know that people, over 1,000 years ago, were just as concerned with taxes as we are. Though paying your taxes in smelly fermented fish probably made the deadline a much more fragrant affair. Imagine the scene. A regional governor from a coastal province has traveled for days to reach the capital. He stands before an imperial tax official, his retinue bearing not coins, but large, heavy clay pots sealed with thick lids and wax. The official makes a note on his scroll, and the pots are carried away to a government storehouse. Inside those pots is Narezushi. It might be ayuzushi, made from the small, delicate sweet fish found in the clear streams of his home province. Or perhaps it's a type of carp from a large lake. The official doesn't need to worry about it spoiling on the journey or rotting in the storehouse. Its preservation is the very source of its value. This single dry bureaucratic mention tells us so much. It confirms that the technique was not only present in Japan, but widespread enough that it was being practiced consistently in various provinces. Different regions would pay their sushi tax with different local fish, meaning the tax records inadvertently created a kind of culinary map of 8th century Japan logging, who was making what and where. But it also tells us something about its status. This wasn't the kind of dish you'd likely post on your 8th century equivalent of Instagram. It was valuable, yes, but more in the way a sturdy pair of boots is valuable than a diamond necklace. Its worth was in its utility, its reliability. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of Narezushi on tax rolls means it was considered a luxury item for the court, or simply a practical, non-perishable foodstuff convenient for government stockpiling. Was this a fine delicacy served to the emperor, a pungent treat for a special occasion? Or was it the ancient equivalent of a military MRE, a stable source of protein to be stored and distributed to soldiers or used to pay government workers? The answer is likely somewhere in between. Its rarity and the labor-intensive process would have made it special, but its powerful unrefined flavor and primary function as a preserved good meant it hadn't yet entered the world of high cuisine. And remember, at this stage, you are still throwing the rice away. The fish is the treasure cured and transformed by its sour, mushy cocoon. An official accepting a pot of Narezushi as a tax payment would have no more considered eating the packing rice than he would have considered eating the clay pot it came in. The journey from this a valued but pungent government commodity to a refined delicacy is still a long one. But the foundation has been laid. Narezushi is now an official recorded part of Japanese life, its value logged for all time in the dry but revelatory language of the law. It has stepped out of the shadows of folklore and into the written record. Let's leave the hushed halls of the Nara court with their dusty scrolls and tax codes. The story isn't on the paper anymore, it's inside those heavy clay pots that the provincial governors delivered. It's time to get a closer look to understand what this Narezushi actually was. You're going to need to brace yourself because this is a world away from the clean, delicate flavors you associate with sushi today. This is something primal, potent, and utterly unapologetic. It's a food born of necessity, and it carries the powerful signature of its creation. You approach a sealed pot that has been sitting in a cool, dark storehouse for many months. There's a sense of ceremony to this, a mix of reverence and trepidation. You know that inside is a valuable food source, the result of a long and patient process. With some effort, you pry the heavy wooden lid off the top, breaking the wax seal. And then it hits you. The smell. It fills the small room instantly, a force of nature released from its earthenware prison. It is staggeringly pungent. It's not the smell of rot, not the smell of something gone bad. That would mean failure. This is the smell of a successful transformation, but it's a transformation that has taken place on its own terms. The primary notes are sour and almost eye-watering acidity, the sharp signature of lactic acid. Underneath that is a deep, profoundly fishy aroma, the concentrated essence of the creature that has been slowly pickling in its own juices. And woven through it all is a third scent, something almost cheesy or gamey. It is less like a fresh sea breeze and more like a very old, very opinionated cheese that has been thinking about fish its entire life. This is not the kind of aroma that makes you think, yum dinner. It's the kind of aroma that makes your cat suddenly very interested, and your significant other suddenly very interested in sleeping on the couch. But to the people of 8th century Japan, this was the reassuring smell of protein that wouldn't kill you. You peer inside the pot. What you see is not beautiful. There's no artful arrangement, no vibrant color. You see a pale brownish-yellow paste, the rice, which has completely broken down into a thick, porridge-like sludge. It's the consistency of wet sand or thick mud. This is the fermentation medium, the engine of preservation, and its work is now done. Buried within this sour mush are the fish themselves. You carefully reach in and pull one out. It is pale, soft, and fragile. It barely holds its shape. If you served this at a modern dinner party, your guests might assume you had forgotten about some fish in the back of your fridge for a year, and they would be, well, they'd be absolutely correct. This is the original form of sushi, Narezushi, in all its glory. The process that created it was a masterpiece of microbiology understood not through science, but through generations of trial and error. By packing the salted fish in cooked rice and sealing it off from the air, you create an anaerobic environment. The natural bacteria on the rice and fish begin to feast on the sugars in the rice, producing lactic acid. This acid lowers the pH of the entire mixture so dramatically that the bacteria that cause spoilage and disease simply can't survive. At the same time, the fish's own enzymes get to work in this acidic environment, breaking down the proteins in the flesh in a process called autolysis. This is what makes the fish so incredibly soft and develops its deep, savory umami flavor. You take the fish and wipe off the sour, gritty rice paste. Remember, you do not eat the rice. The rice is the tool, not the food. Now you examine the fish itself. Sometimes, for smaller fish, like ayu, the entire thing was fermented, bones and all. The year-long acidic bath would soften the bones to the point where they became completely edible, dissolving on the tongue and providing a vital source of calcium. This was whole food nutrition, leaving absolutely nothing to waste. You take a small taste. The texture is unlike any fish you've had before. It's not firm or flaky. It's dense and smooth, almost creamy a bit, like a fine pâté or a well-aged goat cheese. Then the flavor explodes in your mouth. First, the sourness, a powerful wave that makes your jaw tingle. Then comes the salt. And finally, beneath it all, a deep, funky, incredibly complex savory taste that lingers long after you've swallowed. It's an acquired taste in the same way that running ultramarathons is an acquired hobby. You have to really commit, and most people are going to think you're insane. But in a world without refrigerators, this flavor wasn't just a novelty. It was the taste of ingenuity, the taste of survival. Historians still argue whether the specific strains of lactic acid bacteria present in ancient Japan, unique to its water climate, and even the hands of the people making it, gave the Narezushi a subtly different flavor profile from its Southeast Asian ancestors. Just as the terroir of a vineyard defines a wine, the microscopic terroir of a region could have been slowly, invisibly nudging the flavor of this fermented fish in a new direction, a Japanese direction. But for now, it remained a food of function first, flavor second. It was a long way from the delicate balance of a modern sushi chef, but the journey had to start somewhere. It started here in a dark pot, with a powerful smell and a taste that demanded your full attention. Now that you've experienced the potent, pungent reality of early Narezushi, let's take a step back and appreciate the sheer, mind-boggling effort that went into creating a single bite. This wasn't a dish you decided to make on a Tuesday because you were feeling peckish. This was a monumental undertaking, a project spanning seasons, even years. To truly understand this, we need to leave the generic past behind and visit a specific place where an echo of this ancient tradition still survives. You find yourself now on the shores of Lake Biwa, a vast shimmering expanse of fresh water nestled in the mountains of Shiga Prefecture. It's Japan's largest lake, and for centuries it has been the heart of a very special culinary tradition. We are going to make funazushi, one of the most direct living descendants of the food you saw on those Nara tax scrolls. Your calendar for this task is not marked in days, but in seasons. The first step of the recipe is catch a fish. The last step is try to remember where you put the pot 3 years ago. There are a few important details in between. It begins in spring, the cherry blossoms are in bloom, and the waters of the lake are beginning to warm. This is when the funa, specific type of crucian carp, are spawning and are heavy with roe. You head out on a small boat onto the calm waters of the lake and cast your nets. You're specifically seeking the females, their bodies swollen with the promise of the next generation. This roe is a prized delicacy and a key part of the final product. Once ashore, the meticulous work begins. You must scale the fish and remove the gills and innards through the mouth, all without slitting open the precious belly and disturbing the sack of eggs within. It's delicate, painstaking work. Once the fish are cleaned, they are packed not in rice, but in coarse salt. You layer them in large wooden barrels, a layer of salt, a layer of fish, another layer of salt, until the barrel is full. Then a heavy lid is placed on top, weighted down with massive pickling stones, some weighing 40 pounds or more. These barrels are then left in a cool, dark corner of a shed for the entire summer. As the cicadas buzz through the hot, humid months of June, July, and August, the salt and the immense pressure are working to pull moisture from the fish, firming up the flesh and beginning the first stage of preservation. As the oppressive heat of summer finally breaks and the autumn leaves begin to paint the mountainsides in fiery colors, you return to your barrels. You unearth the fish from their salty tomb. They are now stiff, dry, and intensely briny. You wash them carefully in clean water, then let them air dry for a bit. Now the second stage begins. You take heaps of cooked plain Japanese rice. It's cooled to room temperature. You begin to pack this rice inside the body cavity of each fish, filling the space where the guts used to be. Then you place them back in the barrels, but this time you pack every available space with more rice. You press it in, tamping it down, forcing out all the air surrounding the fish completely in a dense cocoon of starch. Another weighted lid is placed on top, and the barrels are sealed. And now you wait. This is a recipe with a commitment level that makes a sourdough starter look like a one-night stand. You're basically entering a long-term relationship with a pot of fish. The barrels are left in their corner, and you go about your life. A year passes. The seasons cycle once more, the spring rains, the summer heat, the autumn harvest, the winter snow. Inside the barrel, that silent, funky magic is happening. The rice is fermenting, creating the lactic acid bath that will pickle the fish, soften its bones, and transform its flavor into that sour, cheesy, umami-rich delicacy. We think we're good at meal prepping for the week ahead. These people were meal prepping for the government that would be in power 2 years from now. Traditionally, funazushi is aged for at least 1 year. Some connoisseurs prefer 2 or even 3 years of aging. With each passing year, the flavors deepen, the sourness mellows slightly, and the texture becomes creamier and more complex. The fish bones, even the thickest ones, dissolve completely into the flesh. The prized roe inside transforms into a salty, pungent, creamy paste, a treasure often compared to a fine-aged caviar. Purists and historians still argue whether the modern, slightly accelerated methods for making funazushi, which might only take a year or so to satisfy tourist demand, capture the same depth of flavor as the ancient versions that were potentially left untouched for 3, 4, or even 5 years. It's a debate about authenticity versus practicality, a conversation that pits the pressures of the modern world against the unhurried timeline of the microbial one. Imagine finally opening that barrel after 2 full years have passed. The smell is the one you remember, but maybe you're used to it now. You dig through the sour brown rice sludge and pull out the transformed fish. You slice it thin and arrange it on a plate. This single dish represents years of planning, of seasonal work, of patient waiting. It's a physical embodiment of time itself, a testament to a worldview where people were in no hurry at all. It was this monumental effort, this tedious, smelly, and incredibly lengthy process that was the standard for making sushi for the first 1,000 years of its existence. It's no wonder, then, that people would eventually start looking for a shortcut. You must now leave the rustic, practical shores of Lake Biwa with its patient fishermen and their pungent barrels. The story of sushi is moving up in the world. You travel forward in time past the end of the Nara period and into a new era of Japanese history, one of the most elegant, refined, and frankly, obsessive-compulsive periods of aesthetic culture the world has ever known. You arrive in the 9th or 10th century, the heart of the Heian period. The capital has moved from Nara to the grand new city of Heian-kyo, the capital of peace and tranquility, which will one day be known as Kyoto. And peace and tranquility for the nobles at the top is exactly what defines this age. You are now in a world governed not by gritty survival, but by exquisitely detailed rules of taste. You are a guest at a banquet held in the sprawling wooden residence of a high-ranking court noble. You recline on silk cushions on a polished wooden floor. The space is open and airy with painted screens depicting serene landscapes and delicate paper shoji doors that slide open to reveal a meticulously manicured garden. The air is perfumed with carefully blended incense, a scent designed to evoke a specific poetic mood. The other guests, both men and women, are studies in elegance. Their faces are powdered white with high painted-on cloud eyebrows. The women are concealed behind layers of brilliantly colored silk robes, the famous junihito, or 12-layer robe, each color combination chosen with seasonal and emotional nuance. This was a culture so obsessed with beauty that they probably wrote a 14-line poem about the exquisite sadness of a single falling leaf. Every aspect of life, the color of your stationery, the quality of your handwriting, the way you folded a note, The blossoms you attached to it was subject to intense aesthetic judgment. Bringing a pot of what is essentially stinky year-old fish into this environment seems like a bold move, a serious social risk. And yet that is precisely what happens. Amidst a procession of delicate, beautiful dishes, clear soups with artfully carved vegetables, grilled wild duck, shimmering cubes of jellied seaweed, a servant places a small, exquisite ceramic dish in front of you. On it are arranged just 2 or 3 paper-thin, translucent slices of Narezushi. It is likely the very Funazushi whose creation you just witnessed. The presentation is everything. The crude, functional pot from the storehouse is nowhere to be seen. The mushy, sour rice has been wiped away completely. All that remains is the transformed fish, now elevated by the sheer beauty of the vessel it rests upon. You might be served these few slivers on a dish that was worth more than a provincial farmer's entire yearly income. It's all about presentation. You can serve almost anything if the plate is nice enough. So how did this happen? How did this functional, funky food of the provinces make its way into the most refined dining rooms in the land? The answer lies in the very thing that made it seem so out of place, its rarity and the incredible labor required to produce it. Because it took so long to make and came from specific distant regions, Narezushi became a status symbol. To be able to procure it and serve it at your banquet was a sign of wealth and influence. It showed you had connections across the country. It showed you could afford something that took literally years of work to create. During the Heian period, we see Narezushi appearing in literature and court diaries not as a tax payment, but as a prestigious gift exchanged between nobles. This is basically the birth of the foodie. It's the appreciation of something not just for its immediate taste, but for its backstory, its rarity, its authenticity. It's the Heian era equivalent of knowing the name of the farmer who grew your kale. The courtiers of this era were obsessed with ranking things. They had official rankings for poets, for incense blends for court positions. Unofficially, they ranked everything. A particularly well-made batch of Narezushi, perhaps from a famed family near Lake Biwa, could become a topic of hushed, refined conversation. Its specific vintage, its pungent but complex aroma, the creaminess of its texture. These were points to be debated by connoisseurs, hiding their smiles and whispered critiques behind elegant fans. Historians still argue whether the Heian elites genuinely enjoyed the strong, challenging taste of Narezushi, or if its consumption was more of a performative act of sophistication. Were they truly savoring that funky, cheesy, sour flavor, or were they savoring the fact that they were the kind of person who was worldly and refined enough to appreciate it? It was perhaps a bit of both. For a palate jaded by endless subtle and perfect delicacies, the shocking, powerful flavor of Narezushi could have been a welcome jolt, a reminder of a more rustic, authentic world outside the perfumed bubble of the capital. For you sitting in this elegant room, the tiny portion of fish seems almost lost on its grand platter. It is a strange interloper, a wild thing tamed by etiquette. But its presence here is crucial. For the first time, sushi is being thought of not just as preserved food, but as a delicacy. Its value is shifting from the purely practical to the aesthetic. The long, slow journey from survival food to art form has taken a major leap forward. But the food itself, the actual substance, has yet to change. You eat the fish, you admire the plate and the rice, as always is still in the trash. The world of silk robes, incense blending, and poetry contests is a beautiful, fragile bubble. And like all bubbles, it is about to burst. The refined aesthetic life of the Heian court in Kyoto was made possible by a vast ecosystem of provinces, farms, and working people who supported it. And for centuries the nobles in the capital had slowly been losing their grip on the powerful clans who ran those provinces. These were families of warriors' men who lived by the sword and managed sprawling agricultural estates. They were growing stronger, wealthier, and more ambitious, and they were growing tired of funding the perfumed lifestyles of their distant superiors. You can feel the change in the air. The delicate music of the koto is being drowned out by a distant drum beat. You are no longer a guest in a quiet Kyoto mansion. The air now rings with the clang of steel on steel, the thunder of horses' hooves, and the war cries of men who have decided that influence is won, not with a well-worded poem, but with a well-aimed arrow. The end of the 12th century sees Japan plunged into the Genpei War, a bitter civil war between the great warrior clans. It's a messy, brutal affair that ultimately sweeps away the old order. The elegant courtiers lose. The hardened warriors win. It's like the poetry club was suddenly replaced by the wrestling team as the head of the school. The vibe in the cafeteria is about to change dramatically. By the time the dust settles in, 1192, a new era has begun. Japan is now under the control of a military government, a shogunate led by the supreme general, the shogun. This is the beginning of the age of the samurai, a feudal period that will last for nearly 700 years. The center of power is no longer the imperial court in Kyoto, but the shogun's rustic fortified headquarters in Kamakura, a town far to the east. You see the new ruler of Japan. He is not a pale courtier with powdered cheeks who spends his days contemplating blossoms. He is a warrior, his face weathered by the sun and wind, his hands calloused from the hilt of his sword. His values are not nuance and elegance, but discipline, loyalty, strength, and pragmatism. This fundamental shift in who holds power brings with it a fundamental shift in taste. The samurai's approach to dining was less, let's compose a haiku about this morsel, and more, is this edible, and will it give me the energy to swing a sword? It's a refreshingly direct approach. The intricate multi-course banquets of the Heian nobility, where visual beauty was paramount, are replaced by simpler, more substantial meals. The focus moves from presentation back to substance. Think less about tiny artful carvings and more about a hearty bowl of rice with grilled boar. Historians still argue about the precise diet of the average samurai, but there's a consensus that it was far more rustic and robust than that of the Heian nobles they supplanted. So where does our old friend, the funky pungent Narezushi, fit into this new world order? Surprisingly, it holds on. In fact, it has a certain appeal to the warrior mindset. Firstly, its original purpose as a preserved food is useful again. For samurai, on long military campaigns, or for stocking castle larders in case of a siege, a food that lasts for years without refrigeration is incredibly valuable, along with dried rice and pickled plums or umeboshi. The potent Narezushi would have been a prized, if rather smelly, part of a warrior's field provisions. Secondly, you could argue its flavor profile was a better match for the new ruling class. For the samurai, the powerful, funky taste of Narezushi wasn't something to be politely whispered about behind a fan. It was a strong, assertive flavor, a food with character. Maybe it was a food that felt like it had been through as many battles as they had. It wasn't subtle, and neither were they. But the samurai also brought a new spirit to Japan, a spirit that would in the long run spell doom for Narezushi in its ancient form. This was the spirit of efficiency and action. The Heian courtier had endless leisure time to wait for a poem to form or for a fish to ferment for 3 years. The samurai lived in a more urgent world. They valued decisiveness, speed, and results. And in this new cultural climate, the idea of waiting years for a meal to be ready starts to seem impractical, inefficient, a bit self-indulgent. The very quality that made Narezushi a rare prize for the Heian nobles, the immense time it took to create, is now beginning to look like a bug, not a feature. The demand for a food that is still preserved, still based on fish and rice, but that doesn't require the patience of a saint, is quietly growing. The world is speeding up. The new masters of Japan are practical men who want practical solutions. They still eat Narezushi, but the cultural seeds of impatience have been planted. The stage is set for the first great innovation in sushi's long history, a change that will finally begin to bring the fish and the rice together, not as a tool and a product, but as a meal. The centuries roll by, marked not by peace and poetry, but by the near-constant struggle for power. You find yourself now in the Muromachi period, a long stretch of Japanese history from the 14th to the 16th century. It's an era of paradoxes, of brutal civil wars, and stunning artistic development, of social chaos and booming trade. Life is unsettled, energetic, and often violent. The practical, action-oriented mindset of the samurai that you first met in Kamakura has now saturated the entire culture. And that spirit of impatience is starting to put serious pressure on the slow, deliberate traditions of the past. Remember that pot of funazushi sitting silently in a shed, taking 1, 2, even 3 years to reach perfection. In this new age that's starting to seem like an eternity, imagine you are a cook in a busy samurai household or a merchant shop in the bustling capital of Kyoto. The demand for food is constant. Your lord or your customer is impatient. They want something to eat now, not next year. That ancient funky-year-old fish is still a respected food, but it's a specialty item. It's not fast food. And in this increasingly fast-paced world, people are starting to crave speed. The first great leap forward in sushi's evolution doesn't come from a brilliant visionary chef inventing a new recipe. It almost certainly comes from a mistake. Or more accurately, it comes from hunger and impatience. Someone somewhere simply can't wait. They have a pot of fish that's been fermenting in rice, but it's only been a few months, maybe only a few weeks. According to 1,000 years of tradition, it's not ready. It's a failed batch. But food is food, and you don't waste it. So you pry open the lid long before you're supposed to. This is the culinary equivalent of hitting "I agree" without reading the terms and conditions. You just want to get to the good part, and you're willing to accept the consequences. The smell that greets you is different from the old Narezushi. It's still sour, yes, but it lacks that deep, cheesy, overpowering funk. It smells brighter, sharper, more cleanly acidic. You pull out a piece of fish, it's also different. It's not the soft, creamy, paste-like texture of a long-fermented fish. It still has some firmness, some recognizable flake, and chew. It has been pickled by the sour rice, but not completely broken down by its own enzymes. It's a more robust version of the fish. And then you look at the rice. After only a few months, it hasn't dissolved into a brown, gritty sludge. It's still recognizable as rice. The grains are soft, swollen, and saturated with lactic acid, but they are still distinct grains. It's a very, very sour porridge. And here comes the revolutionary moment, the single most important turning point in our story so far. For a millennium, the rule was simple: you throw the rice away. It's the tool, the wrapper, the inedible pickling agent. But you're hungry, and you hate to waste food. So driven by curiosity, or maybe just thrift, you do the unthinkable. You take a piece of the lightly pickled fish and you eat it with a scoop of the sour fermented rice. And it's good. The sourness of the rice perfectly complements the sourness of the fish. The soft texture of the rice provides a pleasant contrast to the firmer flesh. Eaten together, they create a complete, balanced bite. It's a revelation. That first person who ate the sour rice was the ancient equivalent of the person who discovered you can eat the cookie dough before you bake it. It's a little risky, it's not what the instructions say, but it is utterly transformative. For 1,000 years, people had been throwing away half the ingredients. Discovering you can eat the rice is like finding out the box your pizza comes in is also edible and delicious. It's a game changer for efficiency. This new style begins to catch on. It becomes known as Narezushi, half-fermented sushi, or Narezushi, raw fermented sushi. Its greatest selling point is its speed. It slashed the preparation time from years down to a matter of months or even weeks. Some versions, which became known as Hayazushi, or fast sushi, were ready in a matter of days. This was the instant gratification of the 15th century. Historians still argue about where exactly this innovation first took hold. Was it in the bustling new marketplaces of Kyoto, where merchants needed to turn over their products quickly? Or was it in a Spartan samurai encampment where thrift and speed were the most important virtues of all? The truth is it probably happened in many places at once, a logical solution to a widespread problem. This was more than just a new recipe. It was a fundamental shift in concept. Sushi was no longer just preserved fish. It was now a dish of fish and rice eaten together. The rice was no longer a disposable tool. It was now a key component of the flavor. This simple act of impatience of not throwing the rice away cracked the entire foundation of what sushi was. It opened the door for every other innovation that was to follow. The journey toward the modern bite of sushi you know today just took a giant, crucial leap forward. You are now living through a quiet revolution. That accidental, impatient bite of fish and sour rice you witnessed in the last chapter has taken hold, and it's spreading like wildfire. This new style, this Narezushi, is more than just a novelty. It's a culinary revelation that is fundamentally reshaping Japan's relationship with its oldest preserved food. It was in many ways the gateway drug of sushi. The original year-long fermented stuff was for the hardcore fans, only an intense experience for a niche palate. But this new version was approachable, tangy, and invigorating, and it was getting everyone hooked. Let's take a moment to properly experience this new creation to understand why it was so appealing. You're in a bustling market town in the 15th century. A vendor is selling this fast sushi from a wooden stall. He opens a shallow tub, and you can see the fish, perhaps glistening slices of mackerel or sardines nestled in a bed of plump white rice. The smell is sharp and clean, a lactic sourness that reminds you of a pickle barrel or fresh yogurt a world away from the deep, funky aroma of the ancient Narezushi. It smells appetizing. The vendor hands you a portion maybe wrapped in a bamboo leaf. You take a bite. The first thing you notice is the texture. The fish is not a creamy paste. It has substance, a pleasant firmness that gives way as you chew. The rice, too, is not a gritty mush. The grains are soft and distinct, clinging together in a happy clump. There's a wonderful contrast between the yielding rice and the more robust flesh of the fish. It's a satisfying mouthful in a way the old style, for all its complexity, never was. Then comes the flavor. It's a clean, bright explosion of sour. It's assertive for sure, but it's a lively tang that makes your mouth water in a good way. It wakes up your palate, and because the fermentation is so much shorter, more of the fish's original flavor shines through. You can taste the rich oiliness of the mackerel, the salty brine of the sea, balanced by the acidity of the rice. It's a food of distinct layers, not one single overwhelming note. For the first time, you are tasting the fish and the rice working in harmony. This shift marks the beginning of a new way of thinking. The goal is no longer just successful preservation. The goal is now deliciousness. Cooks and vendors begin to consciously manipulate the process to achieve a specific flavor profile. People started treating the rice like an actual ingredient, which must have blown the minds of the traditionalists. It's like discovering the foam on your latte isn't just air, it's a critical part of the experience. How long should you ferment this particular type of fish for the perfect balance? A few days, a few weeks. Different types of fish, you realize, react differently to the process. An oily fish, like mackerel for instance, stands up beautifully to a quick pickling, its richness cutting through the sourness. A more delicate white fish might need a gentler, shorter fermentation. This is the birth of the recipe of culinary intention. This intermediate style of sushi, this Narezushi, became incredibly popular throughout the late Muromachi period and into the subsequent era of unification. It was the perfect food for the times. It was quick, it was portable. It used the staple ingredients of fish and rice, and it was genuinely tasty. It was the crucial bridge that connected the ancient past to the culinary future. Of course not. Everyone was thrilled. This was a legitimate disruption in the preserved fish industry. The old-timers, the masters of the multi-year funazushi, probably grumbled into their sake, complaining that this newfangled fast sushi lacked character depth and soul. They'd likely accuse the new generation of being lazy, of wanting everything instantly, of ruining a craft that had been honed over centuries. It's a timeless story, the traditionalists versus the innovators. Food historians still debate how quickly this new Narezushi displaced the older, long-fermented style. Was it a rapid revolution that saw the old ways vanish in a generation? Or more likely, did the two forms coexist for centuries, one becoming a common everyday meal, while the other remained an old-fashioned, powerful delicacy, sought out by connoisseurs for its historic and intense flavor, much like a potent stinky cheese? Is today, the evidence suggests this peaceful coexistence a slow and gradual shift in public taste. But the momentum was clear. The future was getting faster. The idea of using fermentation purely as a preservation method was becoming obsolete. People had discovered that sour rice was a fantastic ingredient. But what if someone somewhere inevitably thought, what if you could get that sour flavor without having to wait at all? The world is changing again, speeding up in a way that would have been unimaginable to the patient makers of Narezushi. You've moved into the 16th and early 17th centuries, an era of tremendous upheaval that gives way to a long, stable peace. The warring states have been unified, and Japan is entering its Edo period. Cities are exploding. A new class of merchants, artisans, and entertainers is rising, creating a vibrant, energetic urban culture. Life is fast, commerce is king, and time is for the first time really starting to feel like money. You're now a food stall vendor in a bustling city like Osaka, or Edo, the new military capital that will one day become Tokyo. Your stall is on a crowded street filled with samurai merchants, craftsmen, and couriers, all hurrying about their business. They are hungry and they want to eat now. That Narezushi, the fast sushi that was ready in a few weeks, was a great innovation in its day. But in this new supercharged environment, even a week is too long to wait to restock your product. You need a method that is as fast as the city itself. The core of the problem is the rice. To get that signature sour taste that people now expect from sushi, you still have to wait for the slow, natural process of lactic acid fermentation to do its work. The flavor is great, but the process is a bottleneck. And then one day the idea strikes you or perhaps a clever competitor down the street. It's an idea of such stunning simplicity that it's a wonder no one had thought of it before. It is the greatest life hack in Japanese culinary history. You know that the sour taste in the fermented rice is acid. What if you didn't have to create the acid? What if you could just add it? You look at the ingredients you have on hand. Besides salt, soy sauce, and sake, you have a jug of rice vinegar. Komisu. It's a common enough seasoning used for pickling vegetables and making dressings. It's sour. It's an acid. You cook a fresh batch of Japanese rice, the same short-grain rice you always use, until it is perfectly steamed, fluffy, and slightly sticky. While it is still hot, you take a ladle of your rice vinegar, maybe mix in a pinch of salt, and a little bit of sugar to soften the sharp edge of the sourness, and you pour it over the rice. You take your paddle and gently fold it in, fanning the rice as you go to cool it down and make it glossy. The smell is incredible. It's not the funky, cheesy sour of fermentation. It's a clean, sharp, appetizing aroma of vinegar steam and sweet rice. You take a taste. For the first time, the rice tastes clean. It doesn't have that "I've been sitting in a bucket for a month" personality. It's bright, zesty, and perfectly seasoned. It has the essential sourness of sushi rice, but it's ready in the 10 minutes it took to cook and mix. You have just invented modern sushi rice. This changes everything, absolutely everything. The invention of vinegared rice completely and permanently severs the 1,000-year-old link between preservation and flavor. The rice no longer needs to ferment. The dish no longer relies on a long, slow microbial process. The invention of vinegared rice basically made fermentation redundant for this dish. It's the equivalent of Netflix making the video rental store obsolete. The original is still cherished by some, but the convenience and clean flavor of the new way is undeniable. Now you can make sushi to order. You take a handful of your freshly made vinegared rice and a piece of fish. Now the fish itself might still be preserved in some way, cured in salt, simmered in soy sauce, or pickled in vinegar, because reliable refrigeration is still centuries away. But the rice component is now instantaneous. This new product, which truly earns the name Narezushi, fast sushi, is a sensation. Historians still debate whether this technique was invented by one single forgotten genius, or if it evolved simultaneously in different urban centers like Osaka and Edo, where the demand for fast, convenient food was highest. The latter seems more likely a logical solution popping up wherever the pressure of the city demanded it. And the recipes varied. Some early versions were much sweeter than what we think of today. In some regions, they used a red vinegar made from aged sake leaves, which gave the rice a distinctive brownish color and a richer, maltier flavor. But the core principle was the same vinegar plus rice equals instant sushi. This was the final critical leap that unlocked the door to the modern age of sushi. By freeing the rice from its fermenting duties, you also freed the fish. The dish was no longer about preservation. It was now purely about flavor, texture, and speed. The stage was set for chefs to start experimenting with all sorts of new toppings and new forms, leading directly to the styles of sushi we know and love today. That brilliant, simple invention of vinegared rice was like a key turning in a lock. It opened up a world of possibilities that had been closed for 1,000 years. Now that you no longer had to wait for fermentation, you could start thinking about sushi, not just in terms of flavor, but also in terms of form. To see the first great flowering of this new idea, you must travel to the merchant heart of Japan, a city humming with commerce, pleasure, and an insatiable appetite. You leave the generic street stall of your imagination and arrive in 18th century Osaka. If the new capital of Edo was the city of the samurai, and the government, Osaka, was the city of money. It was known throughout the land as Tenka no Daidokoro, the nation's kitchen. It was the central clearinghouse for Japan's vast rice trade and a distribution hub for all manner of goods. This was a city built and run by a savvy, sophisticated, and often flashy merchant class. The culture here revolved around the kabuki and puppet theaters, the pleasure quarters, and above all, the pursuit of delicious food. People in Osaka were and still are famously obsessed with eating well. It was the perfect laboratory for culinary innovation. In this bustling environment, a new style of sushi is born, one that perfectly reflects the city's character. It is neat, efficient, beautiful, and highly commercial. You wander through a crowded market, the air thick with the shouts of vendors and the smells of grilling eel and simmering soy sauce. You see a chef at his stall, but he's not just slapping fish onto rice. He's working with a small rectangular wooden box. This is an oshibako, and he is making oshizushi, or pressed sushi. Soon it will also be known as hakozushi, or box sushi. You watch mesmerized by the clean, methodical process. First, the chef arranges a layer of toppings on the bottom of the wooden box. These are not fresh raw fish. Refrigeration is still a distant dream. Instead, the toppings are cooked or cured, prepared in a way that makes them both delicious and stable enough to last the day. You might see a slice of shimmering mackerel that has been cured in salt and vinegar, a piece of fluffy, sweet tamagoyaki, which is a kind of rolled omelet, or perhaps some freshwater eel grilled and lacquered with a thick, sweet soy glaze. Once the toppings are arranged in a beautiful, colorful mosaic, the chef takes a generous amount of the new-style vinegared rice and packs it firmly on top, filling the box to the brim. Then he places the wooden lid inside the frame and presses down with a firm, even pressure. This isn't a gentle pat. It's a determined act of compression, a command to the rice and fish to become one. He then removes the wooden frame, and what's left on his cutting board is a perfect jewel-like cake of rice and toppings. With a few deft cuts of his long, sharp knife, he slices the cake into neat, bite-sized rectangles. This was sushi that had been to finishing school. It wasn't just a heap of ingredients. It was neat, orderly, and perfectly geometric. It was the kind of sushi that would know which fork to use. The appeal was immediate. First, it was beautiful. The cross-section revealed the colorful layers, and chefs took great pride in the artistic arrangement of the toppings. A high-end box of Narezushi with a dozen different varieties was an impressive sight, a popular gift or the centerpiece for a special occasion. Second, it was incredibly practical. The pressing process made the sushi dense and stable. It held together perfectly. This made it easy to pack into bento boxes and sell to theatergoers who needed an elegant meal to eat during intermission. This was the 18th century equivalent of the perfect Instagrammable lunchbox. It looked gorgeous, it traveled well, and it made all your friends jealous. This style of sushi became Osaka's great contribution to the art form. Food historians still debate whether Osaka's elegant, formal oshizushi, or the faster, more rustic style that would later emerge in Edo, represents the true ancestor of modern sushi. In reality, they were simply different answers to different questions. Osaka's merchant culture valued a product that was stable, scalable, and beautiful, something you could make ahead of time and sell as a consistent, high-quality commodity. Oshizushi was the perfect fit. It represented a philosophy of control, precision, and presentation. The chef's artistry happened in the careful layering and the firm press. The individual piece of sushi was just one slice of a larger, perfectly executed whole. It was a remarkable innovation, a huge leap from the fermented foods of the past. But it still contained a memory of the age of preservation. The toppings were cooked or cured, designed to be stable. The idea of celebrating the taste of a truly fresh, unadorned piece of fish had not yet arrived. For that next final leap into the modern world, you will have to leave the nation's kitchen and travel east to the bustling, impatient streets of the shogun's capital. You pack your things and leave the sophisticated, food-obsessed markets of Osaka behind. The story of sushi is on the move again, traveling east toward the new center of power, a city that is growing so fast it feels like it might burst. You join the endless stream of travelers, pilgrims, merchants, messengers, and samurai entourages on the Great Tokaido Road, the main artery connecting the old commercial heart of Japan with its new political one. After a long journey on foot, you arrive. And your first impression of Edo is one of raw, chaotic, untamed energy. This is not the elegant ancient capital of Kyoto with its refined courtly arts. This is not the wealthy established merchant center of Osaka with its reputation as the nation's kitchen. This is Edo, the shogun's seat of power, and in the early 19th century it is arguably the biggest and most dynamic city on the planet. By the 1700s, its population had already surged past 1 million people. Edo was the 18th century equivalent of a boomtown, crossed with a massive college campus during move-in week. It was loud, crowded, a little bit dirty, and absolutely bursting with life. The city is a sprawling, endless maze of wooden buildings. A huge portion of the population is made up of samurai who are required to spend alternate years here away from their home provinces. Many of them live in barracks without their families. The city is also teeming with laborers, construction workers, artisans, and servants who have flocked here for work. It is overwhelmingly a city of men, many of them single, and living in small rented rooms with no cooking facilities. This unique demographic creates a colossal demand for one thing: fast food. This is not a city of leisurely banquets. It is a city of eating while standing up. The streets are crammed with one of the world's first and greatest street food scenes. Everywhere you look, there are vendors selling quick, cheap, and delicious meals from portable stalls called yatai-e. You can smell the savory aroma of soba noodles being boiled and served in a hot broth. You can hear the sizzle of tempura, freshly battered seafood, and vegetables being deep-fried in bubbling oil. You can see vendors fanning skewers of eel, grilling over hot charcoal, lacquered with a sweet soy glaze. The entire city runs on this vibrant informal economy of quick bites. Into this world comes the sushi you knew from Osaka, the beautiful pressed Narezushi. And it's popular to be sure, but it doesn't quite fit the local character. The defining personality of this city is that of the Edoko, the native of Edo. The classic Edoko was said to be boastful, direct, a little reckless, and fiercely impatient. There was a popular saying that an Edoko won't keep his money overnight. This philosophy is a terrible retirement plan, but it makes for a fantastic social life. It's a work hard, play hard mentality cranked up to 11. Historians debate how much this was a genuine cultural trait versus a stereotype promoted in plays and art, but the image of the impatient, live-for-the-moment Edoko stuck. And for a true Edoko, the process of oshizushi was just a bit too slow. It was pre-made. A chef would prepare the blocks of pressed sushi ahead of time, and you would simply buy a piece of the finished product. For a customer who valued speed and freshness, above all, waiting for the chef to unmold and slice a pre-made block felt like waiting for a software update to finish. They wanted to see their food made right there, right then. They craved spontaneity. The orderly, pre-planned geometric perfection of Osaka's sushi felt like it belonged to a different, more deliberate world. Edo demanded something else. It needed a form of sushi that matched its own frantic, energetic, and pragmatic pulse. It needed a food that could be assembled in seconds, not minutes. A food you could point to have made in a flash and eat with your hands while standing at a crowded stall before hurrying on to your next appointment or show. The stage is perfectly set. The technology of vinegared rice is here. The massive demand from a hungry, impatient populace is here. The vibrant ecosystem of street food stalls is here. All that's needed now is one clever, innovative chef to put all the pieces together and create a dish that would not only define Edo, but would one day conquer the world. You are now one of those hurried Edoko caught up in the relentless current of the city. Perhaps you're a carpenter on his way to a job site, a low-ranking samurai with a quick errand to run for your lord, or a delivery man weaving through the crowded lanes. It's the middle of the day, the sun is high, and your stomach is rumbling, but you only have a few minutes and a few coins to spare. A sit-down meal is out of the question. You need fuel, and you need it now. You scan the bustling street, and you spot what you're looking for, a sushi yatai. It's a simple, ingenious piece of mobile architecture, a lightweight wooden cart with a shoulder pole allowing the vendor to transport it easily. At the front, a clean wooden counter, perhaps only a few feet wide. A blue or white fabric curtain, a norin, hangs from a small awning bearing the name of the stall or a simple character for sushi. Behind the counter, everything the chef needs is within arm's reach. There's an insulated wooden tub holding the perfectly seasoned vinegared rice, keeping it at just the right body temperature. Next to it sits a wooden box, the netabako, displaying the toppings for the day, the neta. You see slices of glistening fish, probably mackerel or a kohata gizzard shad that have been cured in salt and vinegar. You see pieces of cooked octopus and shrimp and maybe some sweet simmered gourd or shiny slices of tamagoyaki. You shoulder your way through the small crowd and find a space at the counter. There's no ceremony here, no quiet contemplation. The etiquette is simple point, eat, pay, leave. If you lingered to discuss the subtle notes of the rice vinegar, you'd probably get elbowed out of the way by a hungry construction worker. You point to a piece of the cured mackerel. The chef, a man of incredible efficiency and practiced grace, nods. His hands are a blur of motion. In one fluid movement, he dips his fingers into a bowl of vinegared water to keep the rice from sticking, scoops up a small mound of rice from the tub, and in 3 or 4 deft squeezes, forms it into an oblong ball in his palm. He takes a tiny dab of bright green wasabi paste from a small bowl and smears it on a slice of the mackerel he's plucked from the box. He then gently presses the fish onto the rice, gives it one last forming squeeze, and places the finished piece directly on the wooden counter in front of you. The entire process takes less than 10 seconds. This was the birth of sushi as true fast food. No seating, no reservations, and your order was ready before you even finished paying for it. It was the drive-thru of the Tokugawa shogunate. You don't get a plate. In many of these original stalls, the clean, damp counter was the plate. You pick the sushi up with your fingers, maybe dip one corner into a communal pot of soy sauce, and eat it in 1 or 2 bites. The piece is much larger than what you'd imagine today. The original pieces of nigiri were huge sometimes, 2 or 3 times the modern size, with a hefty portion of rice designed to be a filling, substantial snack. Trying to eat one gracefully would have been impossible. It was less of a delicate morsel and more of a delicious fistful. The taste is a perfect symphony for a palate. In a hurry, the tangy, slightly sweet rice, the salty vinegared fish, and the sharp sinus-clearing kick of the wasabi that cuts through the richness. It's a flavor profile that wakes you up and satisfies your hunger instantly. You might have another piece, maybe the cooked shrimp this time, and then another. The chef keeps a silent tally. When you're done, you pay your few coins and disappear back into the city's human river, your hunger sated. This was revolutionary because it was food for everyone. Historians debate the exact price, but it's generally agreed that a piece of this street stall sushi was incredibly cheap, roughly equivalent to a bowl of hot noodles. This firmly cemented its status as a food for the common person, not the exclusive property of the elites. It was democratic, accessible, and perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the city. This new style of hand-pressed sushi, born out of the energy and impatience of Edo, wasn't just a new recipe. It was a new way of eating a new social institution that would become the dominant face of sushi for centuries to come. All it needed was a name and a founding father to give it one. In the bustling, anonymous ecosystem of Edo's street food scene, where hundreds of chefs churned out thousands of quick meals a day, it would be easy for any single contribution to be lost to time. But history is a bit like a group project. A lot of people do the work, but often only 1 or 2 names end up on the final report. In the great group project of Edo-style sushi, the name that got the A+, the man who is immortalized as its founding father, is Hanaya Yohei. While countless nameless chefs were likely already slapping some form of cured fish onto balls of vinegared rice, Hanaya Yohei is the one credited with perfecting the form, popularizing it, and giving it the name that would stick. You push through the raucous crowds in the Ryogoku district of Edo, a lively area on the banks of the Sumida River. It's a hub of entertainment, home to sumo wrestling tournaments, temples, and the foot of a major bridge, ensuring a constant flow of hungry potential customers. Here in the 1820s, you find his yate, his street stall. It may look much like the others, but there's a confidence in the way he works a certain flair that draws a bigger crowd. You watch him, and you begin to understand his genius. It wasn't necessarily in a single lightning bolt invention, but in a series of brilliant refinements that elevated the dish from a crude snack to a quick, elegant meal. Hanaya Yohei was the Steve Jobs of sushi. He may not have invented every single component, but he packaged it perfectly, made it desirable, and built a fanatical following. First, he doubled down on the idea of speed as a form of theater. His hands moved with a seasoned, almost supernatural quickness. The rice was formed, the topping applied, the finished piece presented, all in a matter of seconds. It was a performance, a guarantee to the customer that what they were about to eat was made just for them right now. His second and perhaps most important innovation was in the treatment of the fish itself. While other vendors were still relying on heavily salted or vinegar-pickled fish, Yohei sought a more delicate balance. He worked to reduce the curing time to the bare minimum required for food safety. Perhaps he would use just a light sprinkle of salt and a quick rinse or a brief marinade in soy sauce or a quick poach in simmering water. His goal was to move beyond mere preservation and allow the fresh natural flavor and texture of the seafood to be the star of the show. This was a radical idea, a crucial step away from the thousand-year-old tradition of sushi as preserved food and toward the modern ideal of celebrating freshness. And third, he is widely credited with standardizing the practice of placing a small smear of wasabi directly on the rice just underneath the fish. This was another stroke of quiet genius. That fiery green paste didn't just add a delicious spicy kick to wake up the palate. As you know, wasabi has natural antimicrobial properties. Adding that little smear was both a flavor enhancer and a tiny green security guard, providing an extra layer of protection against any lingering microbes on the minimally cured fish. It was delicious and functional, a perfect solution for a street vendor in an era without refrigeration. He called his creation Narezushi. The name comes from the Japanese verb niguru, which means to grasp, to squeeze, or to mold with the hands. It was a perfect literal description of the process, that final gentle squeeze that marries the rice and the fish into a single perfect bite. Modern food historians often wrestle with what they call the Hanaya Yohei problem. Did he truly single-handedly invent Narezushi from scratch? Or was he a brilliant entrepreneur and a supremely skilled chef who simply perfected branded and outcompeted his rivals, popularizing an existing street food so effectively that his name became synonymous with it? The latter is almost certainly closer to the truth. But his contribution is no less significant for it. He set the standard. His style of minimally processed fish, his use of wasabi, and his lightning-fast service model were so successful that they were copied by countless other chefs. He created the template for the Edo-style sushi stall, and in doing so laid the foundation for every sushi bar that would ever follow. He may not have drawn the blueprint, but he built the first iconic enduring model. Hanaya Yohei's brilliant refinements had created the perfect vehicle, the quick, elegant, hand-pressed Narezushi. He had pushed the fish toppings to the very edge of freshness using the lightest possible touch of salt or vinegar. But to take the final revolutionary step to sever the last thread connecting sushi to its ancient past as a preserved food, you need one more ingredient. That ingredient isn't a spice or a sauce. It's a location. To understand how modern sushi was truly born, you have to leave the street stalls for a moment and go to the source. You head to the city's heart, its stomach, and its main artery, the sprawling fish market at Nihonbashi. Nihonbashi, which means Japan Bridge, was the official center of the country, the point from which all distances were measured. And fittingly, it was the center of the city's food web. Here, right at the foot of the bridge, a massive, chaotic, and breathtakingly vibrant fish market springs to life every single day before dawn. You stand at its edge as the sun rises, and the air is electric with commerce. It smells overwhelmingly of salt brine and the clean, sharp scent of the sea. It's a world away from the funky, sour smell of the fermentation pots you encountered at the beginning of our journey. This is what made Edo different from the inland capitals of Nara and Kyoto. This is what gave it an edge over even the great port of Osaka. Edo was built directly on a massive nutrient-rich bay. The fishing boats would sail out into the waters of Edo Bay at night, and by morning they would be back, their nets and baskets overflowing with the day's catch. The fish available at the Nihonbashi market was so fresh it probably still thought it had a dental appointment next Tuesday. This was a whole new level of just caught. You watch as fishermen in straw sandals and simple loincloths haul basket after basket of wriggling, shimmering sea life onto the docks. The ground is wet and slick with seawater and fish scales. Merchants with sharp eyes and louder voices inspect the catch, shouting prices, haggling and making deals. Their abacuses click and clatter. It is here that the city's top chefs, restaurant owners, and street vendors come to get their daily supply. They are looking for the best of the bay's incredible bounty. You see gleaming kohara, or gizzard shed a small silvery fish that is quintessential to this new style of sushi. You see baskets of kuruma ebi, Japanese tiger prawns so fresh they are still twitching. There are long snake-like anago, or sea eels, and heaps of tako, or octopus. And then you see a fisherman and his assistants haul a massive torpedo-shaped fish onto the dock. It's a bluefin tuna, a maguro glistening and powerful, even in death. This is the moment, the final leap of faith. A chef, maybe Yohei himself or one of his ambitious rivals, looks at this incredible bounty. He has his perfectly seasoned vinegared rice, he has his sharp knife, he has his wasabi and soy sauce. The fish in front of him is pristine, caught just hours ago. The thought process that had held sway for 1,000 years was that raw fish was dangerous, something to be made safe through fermentation salt or vinegar. But this chef makes a different calculation. The fish is impeccably fresh. The vinegar in the rice is acidic. The wasabi is antibacterial. Maybe it's safe. Serving truly raw fish was a huge gamble. It's like if a famous chef today started serving a dish that everyone thought was poisonous, but insisted it was fine. You'd need a lot of trust in that chef. He takes a slice of the fish completely, utterly raw, and presses it onto a ball of rice. This is the birth of Narezushi. Itame literally means in front of Ito, and it became the brand name for this new style, a declaration that the ingredients were caught fresh right here in the local bay. Ironically, the fish that would become the undisputed king of sushi, the tuna, was originally looked down upon. In the Edo period, maguro was considered a low-class fish food for laborers. The lean, red meat, the akami, was acceptable, but the rich, fatty belly meat, the part we now call toro and pay a fortune for, was seen as trash. It had too much oil, it went rancid incredibly quickly in the era before refrigeration, and it had a bloody taste, some found unpleasant. It was often chopped up and used as fertilizer or cat food. The fact that people used to throw away fatty tuna is proof that the 19th century was a wild time. It's the historical equivalent of finding out that people used to use diamonds as doorstops. Marine biologists and historians now debate whether the classic Itame menu we know today perfectly reflects what was commonly caught back then, but the principle is clear. Thanks to the bounty of the bay, the chefs of Edo completed the journey. Sushi had transformed from a method of preserving fish for a year to a dish of fish and sour rice, eaten together, to a street food snack that could be made in seconds with a glistening fresh-from-the-sea slice of raw fish. The transformation is now complete. You've seen it happen several times now at the bustling street stall and in the hands of the master chef, Hanaya Yohei. It's that final tiny touch before the fish is pressed to the rice, a swift, deliberate dab of a pungent, bright green paste. It's the wasabi. And you've probably always thought of it as a simple condiment, a spicy kick to add a little excitement to your bite. But its role in our story is far more important than that. In the 19th century, in a world without refrigeration, that little green smear was the key that helped unlock the terrifying, thrilling possibility of eating raw fish. It was less of a seasoning and more of a secret weapon. To understand this, you need to leave the city behind for a moment. You travel to a cool, shady valley in the Japanese mountains. The air here is clean and damp, and you can hear the constant, gentle music of running water. You find a terraced field, but it's not growing rice. It's a series of gravel beds with crystal-clear, cold spring water flowing continuously through them. This is the incredibly specific, demanding environment needed to cultivate Wasabia japonica, the plant that gives us true wasabi. It's not a root as many people believe, but a rhizome, a thick gnarled stem that grows just above the soil. Its notorious difficulty to grow made it a rare and valuable commodity, even in Edo-era Japan. Most of the green paste that you encounter in plastic tubes or little packets today is, I'm sorry to say, an imposter. It's usually a mix of ordinary horseradish mustard powder and green food coloring. It's like asking for a famous actor and getting a very convincing impersonator instead. Real wasabi is something else entirely. You watch as a farmer harvests one of the stems. To prepare it, you don't chop it or crush it. You must grate it. The traditional tool is a shark skin grater, a small wooden paddle covered in the dried skin of a shark. The texture, like fine-toothed sandpaper, is perfect for rupturing the plant's cells and releasing its volatile compounds. As you grate the stem in a circular motion, a bright green, fragrant and surprisingly delicate paste begins to form. Now you take a tiny taste. The sensation is immediate and unique. It's not the slow, lingering burn of a chili pepper that attacks your tongue. The heat from wasabi is a volatile chemical reaction. It shoots straight up into your sinuses with a sharp, clean, almost floral fire. It's less of a "my mouth is on fire" experience and more of a "wow, I can suddenly smell colors" kind of a kick. And then, just as quickly as it arrived, it vanishes, leaving your palate feeling clean, refreshed, and strangely sweet. This unique fleeting quality is part of why it's such a perfect partner for sushi. It clears the senses between bites of different fish without overwhelming their delicate flavors. But the real reason it became essential is a matter of science, not seasoning. That fiery sensation is caused by compounds called isothiocyanates, and it just so happens that these compounds are powerfully antimicrobial. Think of wasabi as the fish's tiny, very spicy bodyguard. Its job was to rough up any undesirable microbial characters before they could cause trouble. In an age when eating raw fish was a game of chance, wasabi was a way to stack the deck in your favor. It was known to inhibit the growth of bacteria like E. coli and Staphylococcus, and was also believed to counteract certain fish-borne parasites. This wasn't a new discovery in the Edo period. Wasabi had been used in Japanese cuisine for centuries, often served alongside freshwater sashimi or gamey meats, for exactly this reason, to make them safer and to mask any strong flavors. So when chefs like Hanaya Yohei started pushing the boundaries of freshness, moving closer and closer to serving truly raw fish, reaching for the wasabi was a logical, almost instinctive move. It was a form of natural food insurance. Botanists and historians still debate the chicken and egg nature of its popularity. Did the increased cultivation of wasabi make the trend of eating raw fish possible? Or did the rising popularity of Narezushi create a massive new demand that spurred farmers to figure out how to grow the tricky plant more effectively? Whatever the case, by the mid-19th century, the pairing was inseparable. That dab of green was no longer just an option. It was a non-negotiable part of the Narezushi. Experience a silent, spicy promise from the chef to the customer that what they were eating was not only delicious, but as safe as he could possibly make it. For the better part of a century, our story has remained comfortably within the bustling city limits of Edo, which, by the late 19th century, has been renamed Tokyo, the Eastern capital. Here, in its vibrant wards, Edomae Narezushi has grown from a working-class snack into a beloved local institution. It is a food that is synonymous with Tokyo. Before 1923, asking for Tokyo-style nigiri in another major city like Osaka would be like asking for a genuine New York bagel in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. You might get a confused stare and something vaguely resembling the real deal, but it wouldn't be the same. The art form was proudly, stubbornly local. But a force of nature was about to intervene, an event so catastrophic that it would shatter Tokyo's world, and in doing so accidentally shatter sushi's geographic confines forever. It is just before noon on the 1st of September 1923. You're in Tokyo, a city that is a dizzying mix of the old and the new. Ancient wooden temples stand in the shadow of modern brick-built government offices and department stores. Streetcars clang their way down newly paved roads, sharing them with people in traditional kimonos and the latest Western fashions. It is a city on the cusp of modernity, humming along on a warm late summer day. Then, without warning, the world comes apart. A deep, terrifying roar erupts from the very bedrock of the earth. The ground begins to heave and shake with unimaginable violence. This is the Great Kanto earthquake, a monstrous tremor that lasts for what feels like an eternity. Buildings sway, groan, and then collapse. The old wooden houses splinter into kindling. The proud modern brick buildings, which were thought to be earthquake-proof, crumble into dust. The city is broken in an instant. But the worst is yet to come. The earthquake strikes just as hundreds of thousands of families are lighting their charcoal grills and stoves their hibachi and shichirin to prepare their midday meal. Across the shattered city, these stoves are knocked over, spilling hot coals onto splintered wood, tatami mats, and paper screens. Small fires begin to bloom everywhere. Fanned by strong winds, these small fires merge, creating monstrous firestorms that sweep through the densely packed wooden neighborhoods with terrifying speed. The disaster turns from a great earthquake into a great conflagration. In the aftermath, you are one of those sushi chefs. Your life's work, your beloved yatai, or small neighborhood shop, is gone. It is a pile of ash and rubble, just like everything else around you. The bustling Ryogoku district, where Hanaya Yohei once worked, is a smoldering ruin. The Nihonbashi fish market is devastated. Your customers, your neighbors, they are dead missing or homeless, huddled in makeshift refugee camps in the city's parks. There is no one to feed and no way to feed them. The city, your world, has ceased to exist. So, what do? You do the only thing you can. You take the one thing you have left of value, your knowledge. And you take your knives, your precious razor-sharp sushi knives, which are the extension of your hands and your soul, and you go home. Many of the chefs who had been drawn to the capital for work were not native Edoko. They were men from provinces all across Japan. With nothing left for them in Tokyo, they returned to their families in Osaka, in Kobe, in Hiroshima, and in countless smaller towns. And there in their hometowns, they set up new stalls and new shops. And they began to make the food of their adopted city. They introduced the local people to Edomai Narezushi. For many it was a revelation. They were used to the pressed boxy oshizushi of the Osaka region, or perhaps even older fermented styles. This new thing, this simple, elegant, hand-pressed bite that celebrated the freshness of the fish, was exciting and modern. These displaced chefs became unwitting culinary missionaries. They didn't set out to spread the gospel of nigiri, but they ended up converting the entire country one slice of fish at a time. It is one of history's most profound and tragic ironies. A disaster of unimaginable scale which killed over 100,000 people and leveled the center of Japan's sushi culture became the very catalyst for that culture's national expansion. Historians debate the extent to which Narezushi was known outside Tokyo before the earthquake, but it was the mass exodus of chefs after 1923 that undeniably turned this local delicacy into a truly national cuisine. The hub was destroyed, and in the chaos the knowledge was scattered to every corner of the country where it would take root and begin to grow anew. The seeds of Narezushi, scattered by the great earthquake, have had a couple of decades to take root across Japan. The art form is now known and appreciated nationwide. But our story is about to be shaken by yet another cataclysm, one that will test its resilience and transform its very nature once again. The world plunges into the Second World War, and by the time the smoke clears in 1945, Japan is a nation defeated, devastated, and occupied. You find yourself in the ashes of Tokyo in the late 1940s. The vibrant city you knew is gone again. The post-war years are a time of profound hardship, scarcity, and immense social change. For a sushi chef, it is a near impossible environment in which to practice your craft. Fresh fish, which relies on a functioning fleet and distribution system, is hard to come by. More critically, rice, the heart and soul of your dish, is now a strictly rationed commodity, as precious as gold dust. The idea of using this vital staple for what could be seen as a frivolous luxury seems untenable. And then comes the final blow. The new authorities concerned with sanitation and public health in the chaotic, ruined cities enact strict regulations. Outdoor food vendors are largely banned. The yatai. The humble street stall that was the cradle of Narezushi is outlawed. This is a potential death sentence. The entire culture of grabbing a quick, cheap bite while standing on the street is wiped out. It seems as if sushi might just fade away, a victim of the harsh new reality. But the sushi chefs are survivors. They adapt. If they can no longer sell on the street, they will move indoors. Out of the ashes of the yatai rises the sushi-ya, the dedicated indoor sushi restaurant. At first, these are tiny, humble affairs, often just a small room with a simple wooden counter and a handful of stools. But in setting up these small shops, the chefs unwittingly preserve the most essential part of the street stall experience, the intimate connection between the chef and the customer. The long counter becomes the new stage, and the seated customers get the front row seats watching the master perform his art, just as they had while standing on the street. It's dinner and a show. To navigate the crippling rice shortages, the chefs display incredible ingenuity. An informal system known as mochikomi, or bringing in, is born. A customer hungry for a taste of the world before the war will come to the shop with their own cup of rationed rice. They hand it over to the chef, who then prepares a set number of nigiri pieces, in exchange charging the customer only for the fish, the vinegar, and his labor. It's a quiet, clever act of culinary defiance, a way of keeping the tradition alive through barter when currency and commodities were scarce. As Japan begins its miraculous economic recovery in the 1950s and 60s, these humble indoor shops begin to change. With prosperity comes the end of rationing and a renewed supply of high-quality ingredients. The sushi-ya starts to climb the social ladder. Moving indoors had already given it a new legitimacy. It wasn't just a grubby street snack anymore. Now it becomes a destination. The indoor setting allowed for a more refined, comfortable experience. The sushi itself, no longer constrained by the need to be ultra-cheap, gets a little smaller, a little more elegant. A new kind of customer appears, the salaryman, the urban office worker, who is the engine of Japan's post-war economic miracle. For this new middle class, a trip to the sushi-ya after a long day at the office becomes an important social ritual. You take your clients, you take your colleagues, you sit at the counter and order piece after piece, washing it down with sake or beer. It becomes a symbol of success, an affordable luxury, a way to participate in the nation's newfound prosperity. Nothing says, "I value our partnership," quite like buying someone several pieces of very expensive fish on a small pillow of rice. Sociologists still debate the impact of this shift. Did creating a standard restaurant model make sushi more accessible, or did it begin a process of gentrification that distanced the cuisine from its working-class roots? Perhaps it was both. One thing is certain: the post-war turmoil had forged a new identity for sushi. It had survived near extinction and emerged from the ashes, transformed from a food of the street to a food of the celebratory meal and the business dinner. It was now perfectly positioned for its next great journey, one that would take it far beyond the shores of Japan. You're standing inside a small, intimate sushi-ya in the late 1950s. The post-war recovery is turning into a full-blown economic miracle. Life is getting better, more modern. And yet, for all the changes in the world outside, your craft as a sushi chef is still governed by the same ancient tyrant time. Your entire day, your entire art is a frantic race against the clock. You buy your fish at the market at dawn, knowing it has only hours of peak freshness. Every technique you've mastered, the light curing, the careful application of wasabi, the perfectly balanced vinegar in the rice, is a strategy in your long war against decay. Your menu is limited to what the local boats brought in this morning. Anything that doesn't sell by tonight is a loss. Then one day, a large humming enamel white metal box is delivered to your small restaurant. Your wealthier competitors may have had ice boxes for a while, but this is different. This is an electric refrigerator. It is without any exaggeration the single most revolutionary piece of technology to ever enter the world of sushi. For a sushi chef, getting a refrigerator was like a wizard finally getting a magic wand that actually worked. All the complex spells he'd been trying to cast against spoilage for centuries suddenly became 1,000 times easier. You plug it in. It hums to life with a quiet, steady thrum. You open the heavy door, and a wave of clean, cold air washes over you. It's like looking into the future. This simple machine changes everything in ways both obvious and profound. The most immediate change is freedom from the tyranny of the clock. You can now store that pristine fish you bought at the market and keep it in a state of suspended animation, perfectly fresh for days instead of hours. The financial risk that haunted every chef is suddenly lifted. Waste is dramatically reduced. You can breathe a little easier. But the real revolution is what the refrigerator allows you to bring into your kitchen. You are no longer tethered to the daily catch of Tokyo Bay. A restaurateur in Tokyo can now order a shipment of exquisite fat scallops or briny sea urchin uni from the cold northern waters of Hokkaido, hundreds of miles away. It can be sent down on a newly refrigerated train car or truck, arriving in your kitchen in a state of perfect chilled freshness that would have been unthinkable just a decade earlier. The refrigerator blew the doors off the traditional Itamae menu. Suddenly, a chef could source ingredients from all over the country, turning the hyper-local Tokyo specialty into a greatest hits album of Japanese seafood. And this leads us to the greatest glow-up story in culinary history, the redemption of fatty tuna. Remember the toro, the rich, oily belly meat of the tuna that was once considered cat food because it went rancid so quickly. Refrigeration turned that fatal flaw into its greatest feature. The cold stabilized the delicate fats, preventing them from spoiling while preserving their incredible melt-in-your-mouth texture and rich, complex flavor. With the ability to keep it perfectly chilled, chefs discovered that toro was not in fact trash. It was a treasure. The ugly duckling of the sea had, thanks to technology, become a beautiful, delicious, and very expensive swan. This new technology even changed the sensory experience of eating sushi. Purists and modernists still debate the ideal temperature to serve a piece of nigiri. Traditionalists hearkening back to the pre-refrigeration days might argue for fish served closer to body temperature, allowing its natural oils and flavors to be fully expressed. But the modern palate has largely been shaped by the refrigerator, coming to associate the slight chill of the fish against the warmth of the rice as the signature of freshness and quality. Of course, the technology evolved. Those early commercial refrigerators were soon joined by specialized high-humidity coolers designed specifically to keep fish from drying out. But the principle remained the same. This quiet humming box in the corner of the kitchen had fundamentally broken the last two chains that had bound sushi for its entire 2,000-year history, the chain of time and the chain of distance. With fish that could be kept fresh indefinitely and sourced from anywhere in the world, sushi was now ready to take its final global journey. Your new refrigerator is humming away in the corner, a faithful servant keeping your expanded inventory of seafood perfectly chilled. Your menu is no longer limited by the ticking clock or the local fishing report. You have amazing new ingredients at your disposal: glistening jewel-like salmon roe, or ikura, creamy briny sea urchin tongues, or uni, maybe a delicate mixture of chopped fatty tuna and green onion that you call negitoro. You are living in a golden age of ingredients. But this golden age presents you with a new, very practical problem: the elegant form of Narezushi. A simple slice of fish resting on a pillow of rice is perfect for a firm piece of tuna or mackerel. But how exactly are you supposed to serve a spoonful of salmon eggs? You can't just balance them on top of the rice. They would cascade off the sides before the customer could even pick it up. How do you contain these new wonderful but structurally unsound toppings? The challenge is no longer about preservation. It's about architecture. And once again, the quiet ingenuity of the sushi chef provides the answer not with one solution, but with two. The first solution involves an ingredient that has been part of Japanese cuisine for centuries, but will now find its most famous role. You reach for a sheet of nori, the paper-thin, dark green sheets of dried and toasted seaweed. It's savory, a little bit, salty, and surprisingly strong. You lay a sheet of nori on your flexible bamboo rolling mat, the maki-su. You spread a thin, even layer of your vinegared rice over it. Then in the center, you place your filling, perhaps a simple strip of tuna or cucumber. Gripping the edge of the mat, you roll the whole assembly away from you, tucking and tightening until you have a perfect compact cylinder. The maki roll was a brilliant solution for diners who were tired of their sushi toppings making a run for it. It's the culinary equivalent of putting a nice secure fence around your delicious ingredients. A few quick slices, and you have several bite-sized pieces of what you call makizushi, or rolled sushi. This form is a game changer. It can safely contain multiple ingredients, chopped fillings, and sauces. One of the earliest and most famous examples, the simple tuna roll, or tekkemaki, gets its name from a curious source. In the Edo period, gambling dens were known as tekkebae. This simple one-handed roll was the perfect no-mess snack for gamblers who wanted to eat without getting their fingers or their playing cards sticky. But while the roll is a great solution for many things, it still doesn't quite work for the most delicate, wet, and precious toppings like uni and ikura. For that, you need an even more specialized invention. The credit for this brilliant idea goes to the chefs at Ginza Kyubi, a now legendary sushi restaurant in Tokyo. Sometime in the 1940s, faced with this very problem, they invented a new form. Instead of wrapping the ingredients completely, they built a vessel. You watch the process, a masterpiece of simple design. The chef takes a small oblong ball of rice, just as he would for nigiri. But then he takes a strip of nori, about 1.5 inches wide, and wraps it around the side of the rice ball, leaving it standing up high, like a protective wall. The nori is sealed with a single grain of rice, creating a small edible cup on a rice platform. This cup can then be gently filled with those impossible ingredients. He calls it gunkan-maki, the battleship roll, and if you look at it, a dark oval hull with a precious cargo on its deck, you can see the resemblance. The gunkan-maki is basically an edible shot glass for delicious things. It's a testament to the fact that if a food is tasty enough, humanity will invent a way to transport it to its mouth. Culinary historians still debate the exact popularization timeline of various rolled sushi, but there's no doubt that these two forms, the maki and the gunkan, were crucial evolutions. They were creative solutions to the new challenges and opportunities presented by refrigeration. They expanded the definition of what sushi could be, moving it beyond a single slice of fish on rice. The toolbox of the sushi chef was now complete, filled with all the fundamental shapes and techniques needed to handle any ingredient. And with this complete toolbox, sushi was finally ready to look beyond its own borders and begin its slow seduction of the entire planet. The physical form of sushi, as you would recognize it, is now largely complete. The hand-pressed nigiri, the rolled maki, the battleship gunkan. The fundamental building blocks are all in place. The technology of refrigeration has unlocked a vast national pantry of ingredients. But the next stage of our story isn't about an evolution you can taste or see. It's about an evolution in meaning. It's the story of how this humble fast food snack from the streets of Edo transformed itself into a potent symbol of Japan itself, a culinary ambassador ready to take on the world. You are in Japan in the 1960s. The nation is thrumming with the energy of its post-war economic miracle. Cities are being rebuilt with astonishing speed, new industries are booming, and a sense of national confidence is returning. In this heady atmosphere of reinvention, the country begins to look at its own traditions, with fresh eyes deciding what it wants to keep and what it wants to present to the world as its modern identity. And it finds a perfect candidate in the sushi bar. You watch an itame, a sushi chef at work behind his clean cypress wood counter. In the eyes of the culture, he is no longer just a cook or a food vendor. He is now seen as a shokunin, a master craftsman, an artisan who has dedicated his life to the pursuit of perfection in a single skill. There's a common saying you hear, "Itamai no mai, nitatsu made junen." It takes 10 years before you are even allowed to stand in front of the cutting board. This idea of a long, silent, and incredibly difficult apprenticeship of mastering the perfect slice of fish or the seasoning of the rice elevates the chef from a mere laborer to a revered artist. The sushi chef went from being the guy you bought a quick snack from on the street to being regarded with the same reverence as a concert pianist or a brain surgeon. And he did it all without ever leaving his spot behind the counter. The food itself becomes a vessel for core Japanese aesthetic values. In a world that's getting louder, faster, and more complicated, sushi comes to represent purity, elegance, and simplicity. The clean, minimalist lines of the sushi-ya, the focus on a single perfect ingredient, the respect for the natural flavor of the fish. All of this feels like a beautiful antidote to the chaos of modern life. It also emphasizes a deep connection to nature and the seasons. A great chef is praised for his knowledge of how to shun the exact peak season for every type of fish, and serving these ingredients at their absolute best is a way of honoring the rhythms of the natural world. The great coming out party for this new vision of Japan is the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. The world's attention is focused on the city, and Japan is determined to showcase itself as a peaceful, sophisticated, and technologically advanced nation. Visitors from every corner of the globe arrive, and for most, it is their first real encounter with Japanese culture. They explore the city, and they get hungry. They wander into the immaculate, intriguing world of the sushi-ya. For many visitors in 1964, trying real sushi was as much a part of the Olympic experience as watching someone throw a javelin, and arguably a lot more delicious. International journalists wrote glowing articles, not just about the mysterious food, but about the whole experience, the masterful chef, the beautiful presentation, the healthy ingredients. The Olympics helped solidify sushi's new status. It was no longer just food, it was a cultural experience. As Japan's economy continued to grow into a global powerhouse through the 70s and 80s, sushi became one of its chief cultural exports, a form of soft power. It became the ultimate brand ambassador for the nation. It was healthier than a sumo wrestler, more elegant than a samurai sword, and a lot easier to export than a car factory. Cultural critics still debate whether the elevation of sushi to a high art was a natural evolution of taste or a more conscious branding effort by Japan's cultural and economic leaders to project a specific positive image to the West. The truth, as always, is likely a mix of both. But the result was undeniable. By the time sushi was truly ready to leave home, it was armed with a powerful new identity. It wasn't just a dish of fish and rice anymore. It was a taste of Japanese refinement, discipline, and harmony with nature, all served in one perfect bite-sized piece. Sushi is now a proud symbol of Japanese culture, refined in the restaurants of Tokyo and imbued with the spirit of the master craftsman. It is ready for its most ambitious journey yet. You must now leave the shores of Japan, crossing the vast Pacific Ocean. Your destination is Los Angeles, California, in the mid-1960s. The world you enter is a world away from the quiet reverence of the sushi-ya. This is the land of backyard barbecues, drive-in diners, and TV dinners. The average American's idea of an adventurous seafood meal at this time was perhaps getting the fried clams instead of the fried shrimp. The concept of eating raw fish was not just foreign. It was something you'd expect to see in a jungle survival manual, not on a dinner plate. Into this world steps our story's next great pioneer. He is not a chef. He is a quiet, visionary businessman named Narezushi Kanai. Kanai ran a successful food import-export business, mutual trading company, acting as a bridge between Japan and the United States. And he had a bold, perhaps even a foolish idea. He saw the growing community of Japanese businessmen and their families in Southern California, and he felt they were being starved of a true taste of home. He believed that if he could just recreate an authentic Tokyo-style sushi experience, there would be a market for it. First, he needed a chef. This was no easy task. You can imagine the conversation. You are Narezushi Kanai trying to convince a skilled itamehyo in Tokyo to leave his home and move to this strange land of giant cars and raw steak-obsessed barbarians. You'd have to be an incredible salesman. Eventually, Kanai succeeded, persuading a chef named Shigeo Saito to take the leap of faith. Next, he needed a location. In 1966, in the heart of Los Angeles' Little Tokyo district, Kanai helped establish the restaurant that would change everything Kawafuku. From the outside, it was unassuming, but inside he insisted on complete authenticity. He had a beautiful pale cypress wood counter built just like the ones in Ginza. Chef Saito stood behind it in his traditional uniform with his long, gleaming knives. This was not a modified, watered-down version of sushi. This was the real thing, an embassy of Edome-style sushi planted in the heart of California. The initial customers were almost exclusively Japanese expatriates. They would come in their faces lighting up with recognition and relief, finally able to eat the food they so deeply missed. They would speak with Chef Saito in Japanese, discussing the day's catch. The first Americans who bravely stepped into Kawafuku were the culinary astronauts of their generation, boldly going where no one they knew had gone before, and trying not to make a face. Kanai's biggest challenge, however, was the supply chain. There was no such thing as sushi-grade fish in America. Convincing an American fish wholesaler in 1966 that you wanted to buy their best, most expensive tuna to serve it, raw, was like trying to convince a banker you wanted to invest your life savings in pet rocks. It required a very, very good sales pitch. Kanai used his business acumen and tireless patience to build this supply chain from nothing. He personally went to the seafood purveyors, teaching them which local fish, like sea bass from the Santa Monica Pier or albacore from the San Pedro fleets, were suitable. He showed them how the fish needed to be handled with extreme care, bled and gutted immediately, and kept impeccably cold. He built the logistical bridge that made the whole enterprise possible. Food historians debate the exact first sushi in America, as some older Japanese-American restaurants may have served simple rolls. However, there is a strong consensus that Kawafuku was the first to feature a dedicated itamae at a traditional sushi counter, marking the birth of the authentic sushi-ya experience in the United States. It was Narezushi Kanai, the quiet ambassador, who orchestrated it all. He wasn't the artist, he was the producer. He found the talent, he built the stage, and he sourced the materials. Word slowly began to spread beyond the Japanese community, passed between adventurous food lovers, Hollywood executives, and celebrities looking for the next exotic thrill. The seed had been planted in foreign soil, and thanks to the patient work of its first great champion, it was just beginning to sprout. The authentic sushi-ya has successfully been transplanted to Los Angeles, but it remains a niche enthusiasm. It's a curiosity for Japanese businessmen and a handful of truly adventurous American foodies. For sushi to take the next step, to move from a cult favorite to a mainstream phenomenon, it needs to adapt. It needs a Trojan horse. It needs a friendly, smiling ambassador to breach the walls of the Western palate. That ambassador would be born not in Tokyo, But in the heart of Hollywood, it would be called the California roll. You are now a sushi chef, perhaps a man named Ichiro Mashita, working at a restaurant called Tokyo Kaiken in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. You are a master of the traditional Idomai style, but you are also a keen observer of your new customers. You watch the Americans who bravely wander in. You see their hesitation. You see them struggle with the unfamiliar textures and flavors. You notice they often avoid the pieces with the darkest, most intensely flavored seaweed, the nori. And you see the outright fear in their eyes when presented with something like raw squid or sea urchin. They want to like this sophisticated new food, but their palates are not yet ready for the advanced course. You realize you don't need to challenge them. You need to welcome them. You need to invent a gateway roll. The first problem to solve is the raw fish. It is the highest hurdle. So you decide to remove it completely. In its place, you need something with a seafood flavor, but a familiar cooked texture. You reach for crab meat. It's mild, it's sweet, and it's cooked. To add a creamy, rich texture, something to mimic the decadent mouthfeel of the fatty toro that Japanese connoisseurs love you. Turn to a local ingredient that is plentiful in California. You slice into a ripe green avocado. Its buttery smoothness is the perfect substitute, a familiar flavor that feels both healthy and luxurious to the local clientele. Now you have your fillings, crab and avocado, a perfect non-threatening combination. But you still have the problem of the nori. You watch as your American customers sometimes try to peel off the dark seaweed wrapper. They find its chewy marine flavor strange. The solution that comes to you is a stroke of pure genius. If they don't like looking at the nori, you will simply hide it. You will turn the roll inside out. This had never been done before. For centuries, the logic of a maki roll was simple nori on the outside, rice on the inside. You reverse it. You lay down your bamboo mat, but you spread the rice directly onto the mat. Then you place the sheet of nori on top of the rice. Then you add your fillings and roll it all up. The result is a roll where the rice forms the exterior and the scary black seaweed is tucked away, hidden from view, on the inside. This new inside-out style is called uramaki. To complete the illusion and to keep the sticky rice from clinging to everything, you give the outside a coating, rolling it in a shower of toasted sesame seeds, adding a nutty flavor and a pleasant crunch. The California roll is born. It is a masterpiece of cross-cultural adaptation. It contains no raw fish. The unfamiliar seaweed is hidden. Its flavors are a friendly combination of creamy savory and sweet. It's an immediate runaway hit. The exact origin of the roll is one of modern sushi's great legends, and it's still hotly debated. Another Los Angeles chef, Ken Sousa, also has a very strong claim to inventing it around the same time to please a customer who didn't like tuna. It's entirely possible that this brilliant idea emerged in several places at once as different chefs tried to solve the same problem. But wherever it began, its effect was undeniable. Purists in Tokyo probably scoffed at this bizarre Frankenstein creation with its avocado and inside-out rice. But that bizarre creation became the single most important vehicle for sushi's global spread. It was the training wheels that allowed millions of people to try sushi without fear. It was approachable, it was delicious, and it was uniquely American. It got people into the restaurants and sitting at the sushi bars. And once they were there, once they had tried the California roll and realized it was wonderful, they would get curious. And their eyes would drift over to the other mysterious and beautiful pieces of fish resting on pillows of rice. The California roll had opened the door, and now the whole world was ready to come inside. The California roll was not just a successful recipe, it was a key that unlocked a new philosophy. It proved that the sacred format of sushi was in fact flexible. It could bend without breaking. It could absorb new ideas, new ingredients, and new tastes, and still be recognizably, deliciously sushi. This realization, born in a Los Angeles kitchen, is what allowed sushi to begin its final transformation from a Japanese cuisine into a truly global one. You are watching as the California roll becomes a sensation. It escapes the confines of Little Tokyo and Hollywood, and powered by the 1980s craze for all things trendy, healthy, and a little bit glamorous, it begins to conquer North America. Sushi in the 80s spread faster than a celebrity rumor. One day, it was an exotic food you could only find in a few major cities, and the next, it felt like there was a sushi bar opening in a suburban strip mall in Ohio. This explosion created a demand for chefs, and for the first time, a wave of non-Japanese apprentices began to train under the masters, learning the craft, and then adding their own cultural spin. The philosophy of adaptation pioneered by the California roll went into overdrive. Chefs around the world started treating the maki roll like a blank canvas, and they were not afraid to get creative. In Philadelphia, a chef looked at the classic local breakfast of a bagel with lox and cream cheese and had an idea. He created the Philly roll, combining smoked salmon cucumber and a generous smear of cream cheese. If someone had tried to put dairy in a roll in 19th century Edo, they likely would have been gently but firmly escorted out of the city. Here it was a stroke of genius, another perfect bridge between Japanese form and American taste. In kitchens across the continent, another thrifty and brilliant idea emerged, the spicy tuna roll. Chefs took the leftover scraps from carving up a block of tuna, the parts not pretty enough for nigiri, and chopped them up, mixing them with a creamy, spicy mayonnaise made with sriracha or other chili sauces. It was a way to use the whole fish, and the resulting spicy, savory, creamy taste was an instant addiction for millions. The adaptations became a reflection of each new place sushi landed. In the American South, you began to see deep-fried tempura rolls. In the Pacific Northwest, local Dungeness crab and geoduck clam made their way onto menus. The caterpillar roll draped in a beautiful blanket of overlapping avocado slices, and the dragon roll with its rich grilled eel became elaborate edible sculptures. Even the fish themselves began to change. Salmon, now one of the most common and beloved sushi toppings in the world, was never a part of the traditional edamame lineup. The Japanese were deeply skeptical of eating their native Pacific salmon raw due to concerns about parasites. The popularization of salmon sushi is amazingly thanks to a concerted Norwegian marketing effort in the 1980s. Project Japan, as it was called, was a decade-long push by the Norwegian seafood industry to convince the Japanese that their farm-raised Atlantic salmon was parasite-free, high quality, and perfect for raw consumption. It's one of the greatest marketing feats of all time, like successfully selling ice to people who live in an igloo. They were just that good, and in doing so, they created a new global sushi staple. This flurry of creative adaptation raises a question that purists and fusion advocates still debate. Can these wildly inventive rolls filled with cream cheese mango or spicy mayo still be authentically called sushi? Does the term refer only to the traditional preparations of Japan, or has it evolved into a broader culinary language, a term for any dish that uses vinegared rice as its base? There is no right answer, but it's clear that sushi had become a conversation between Japan and the rest of the world. It was no longer just a broadcast, but a dialogue with each new culture adding its own verse to the story, a story that was now unfolding not just in Tokyo, but in London, Paris, Dubai, and São Paulo, a delicious edible testament to global creativity. While creative chefs in America are busy inventing rolls with cream cheese and spicy mayonnaise, our story needs to take a brief trip back in time and back to Japan. We must travel to post-war Osaka in the 1950s because a different kind of revolution was brewing, one that had nothing to do with ingredients and everything to do with engineering. This innovation wouldn't change what sushi was, but it would completely change how you got it from the chef to your plate, making it more accessible, affordable, and fun than ever before. You are Yoshiaki Shiraishi, the owner of a small standing-room-only sushi restaurant in Osaka. Your business is good, perhaps too good. You are constantly busy, and you are chronically short-staffed. You simply cannot find enough skilled sushi chefs to hire, and even if you could, you couldn't afford them. Every day is a struggle to keep up with the hungry crowds. You need a way to serve more people more efficiently with the small team you have. You need to automate. The inspiration doesn't strike you in your kitchen. It strikes you while you're touring an Asahi beer brewery. You're not thinking about sushi at all. You're watching a bottling line mesmerized as thousands of beer bottles clink and clatter their way along a metal conveyor belt. It's a river of glass and steel moving efficiently and tirelessly. And a brilliant, audacious idea sparks in your mind. What if you could do that, but with plates of sushi? It turns out the secret to revolutionizing the sushi industry was found at the bottom of a beer bottle, or at least on the belt that carried it. The idea is one thing, the execution is another. You spend the next 5 years consumed by the project tinkering in a small workshop. There are countless problems to solve. How fast should the belt move? If it's too fast, the rice on the sushi will dry out, and customers will feel too rushed to grab a plate. If it's too slow, people will get bored and impatient. After much testing, you settle on the ideal speed, 8 centimeters per second. Then there's the problem of the corners. A simple belt can't turn a corner without the plates bunching up and falling off. You have to design special fan-shaped metal plates to create a flexible interlocking crescent that can smoothly navigate a 90-degree bend. Finally, in 1958, you are ready. You open the world's first conveyor belt sushi restaurant, Mawaru Genroku Sushi. Customers walk in and their jaws drop. You take a seat at the counter and it feels like you're eating a meal in the future. A seemingly endless parade of small plates, each bearing 2 pieces of sushi, glides silently past you on a winding mechanical track. You see a plate of gleaming tuna, you just reach out and take it. A few moments later, a plate of cooked shrimp appears. You take that too. It was dinner meets a model train set. The only thing missing was a tiny conductor shouting, "Now arriving platform 1, the fatty tuna." This new format, which you call Kaitenzushi, or rotating sushi, is a runaway success for several reasons. First, it solves your staffing problem. A handful of chefs in the center of the loop can now serve an entire restaurant, constantly making and replenishing the most popular items. But more importantly, it completely democratizes the sushi experience for the customer. The traditional sushi bar could be intimidating. You had to know the names of the fish, you had to get the chef's attention, and you had no idea how much your meal was costing until the final, sometimes terrifying bill was tallied. Kaitenzushi removed all that anxiety. You could see the food before you chose it. Pricing was simple and visual. The price of the dish was determined by the color or pattern of the plate it was on. You could control the pace and the cost of your own meal, stacking your empty plates beside you to be counted at the end. It made sushi casual, unintimidating, and affordable, turning it into a perfect meal for students on a budget or families with picky children. The concept got its biggest boost when it was featured at the 1970 Osaka World Expo, exposing it to millions. From there, conveyor belt sushi exploded across Japan and eventually the world. There's a friendly debate among sociologists about which innovation did more to make sushi a food for the masses, the cheap street stall of Old Edo or the affordable, futuristic Kaitenzushi of the 20th century. Both in their own time took sushi out of the hands of the elite and gave it back to the people. At the very same time that sushi is becoming a fun, cheap, and futuristic meal gliding by on a conveyor belt, another completely opposite movement is taking place. It's a quiet counter-revolution, a return to the source. While one path for sushi led to mass-market accessibility, this other path leads to a hushed, rarefied world of extreme dedication where sushi is elevated from a simple meal into a high art form. This is the world of the modern sushi master. You step away from the cheerful, noisy Kaitenzushi restaurant and into a small, quiet, and impossibly clean space. It might be in a quiet alley in Ginza or famously in the basement of a Tokyo office building next to a subway station. There are perhaps only 8 or 10 seats all arranged along a flawless cypress wood counter. The air is still and charged with anticipation. Behind the counter stands the master, the iramai. He may be an old man, his face a mask of intense concentration. He says very little. His movements are spare precise and have been practiced so many times they have become an unconscious extension of his will. This is not a restaurant. It is a temple. And the chef is its high priest. To understand this world, you must understand the spirit of the shokunin, the master craftsman, in its most extreme form. And there is no greater modern icon of this spirit than Jiro Ono. You are Jiro. You were born in 1925. You left home to begin your apprenticeship at the age of 9. You wake up in the morning and your first thought is of sushi. Your last thought at night is of sushi. You have, as the title of the documentary that made you a global icon suggests, spent your entire life dreaming of sushi. Your single-minded goal is the pursuit of perfection, a goal you know you can never truly reach, but the pursuit itself is what gives your life meaning. The philosophy here is not about adding more but taking away. It's about finding the absolute best ingredient in all of Japan at the absolute peak of its season and doing just enough to it to allow its perfect natural flavor to shine. You don't use avocado or cream cheese or spicy mayonnaise. You see such things as a distraction, a way of masking imperfect ingredients. Your ingredients are so perfect they need no such disguise. Your day starts before dawn, with your son and heir visiting the fish market, not just buying fish, but maintaining deep, decades-long relationships with the specialist vendors who are also masters of their own craft, the tuna guy, the shrimp guy, the eel guy. Each one knows your impossibly high standards and saves their very best for you. The preparation is an exercise in obsessive detail. You watch an apprentice who has been tasked with making the tamagoyaki, the deceptively simple sweet egg omelet that ends the meal. He has been practicing this single dish for 10 years. For years, you rejected his every attempt. It was too sweet, not airy enough, slightly burnt. Finally, one day after a decade of trying, he presents his omelet, and you nod. "This is how it is done," you say. The apprentice weeps with joy. This is the level of dedication required. Before they ever touch a piece of fish, your apprentices spend years learning to properly wash and cook the rice, to master the balance of the vinegar seasoning, even famously spending a year just learning how to correctly wring out the hot hand towels for customers. When a customer sits at your counter, they are putting themselves in your hands. There is no menu. You serve an omakase meal, a tasting menu where you decide every single piece served one at a time in a specific order, designed like a musical symphony. You notice if a customer is left-handed and place the sushi on the counter accordingly. You subtly adjust the size of the rice portion to be smaller for a female customer. You watch them and you expect them to give the piece their full attention, to eat it within seconds of it being placed before them, while the rice is still at the perfect body temperature and the fish is at its peak. Eating at one of these top-tier sushi bars is less a meal and more a final exam that you are paying a lot of money to take. It is delicious, but also slightly terrifying. When the film Jiro Dreams of Sushi was released in 2011, it introduced this intense purist philosophy to the world. It inspired a new generation of chefs and a new category of diners willing to pay hundreds of dollars for the experience. It cemented the image of the sushi master as a living treasure. While half the world was happily grabbing a California roll, a small, reverent group was sitting in silent awe, experiencing the culmination of a 2,000-year journey in a single perfect, unforgettable bite. You have sat at the counter of the master chef and witnessed the religion of perfection. You understand that the soul of high-end sushi lies not in complicated technique, but in the sublime quality of the ingredients. Now you must go to the source. You must journey to the place where that quality is judged, fought over, and acquired every single day. For over 80 years, there was only one such place that mattered. You are going to the Tsukiji Fish Market. The year is any year between 1935 and 2018. You arrive in the heart of Tokyo while the city is still asleep in the dead of night. But here at Tsukiji, the day is already in full swing. This is not just a market. It is a sprawling, chaotic living city dedicated entirely to seafood. Visiting Tsukiji was like stepping into a metropolis where the traffic laws were optional and the official language was energetic shouting. It is overwhelming, confusing, and absolutely magnificent. The air, surprisingly, doesn't smell fishy. It smells of clean, cold salt water of the deep ocean itself. Your first stop is the most legendary spectacle, the pre-dawn tuna auction. You enter a vast chilly warehouse. Laid out on the concrete floor in neat, endless rows are hundreds of frozen bluefin tuna. They look like dull gray torpedoes, each one tagged with a number. This is where the fate of the world's most expensive fish is decided. The potential buyers representing top restaurants and wholesalers move through the rows with an almost holy reverence. They carry small flashlights and sharp handpicks, peering intently at the cross-section of the tail, which is all that has been cut open. From this small window, they can judge the color, the quality, and the fat content of the entire massive fish. Then a man with a handbell rings it sharply, and the theater begins. The auctioneer, perched on a wooden stool, launches into a rapid-fire melodic chant, a mysterious and ancient-sounding song that is his call for bids. The buyers, scattered around him almost imperceptibly, raise a finger or make a subtle gesture with their hands. This is tiari, a silent secret sign language for bidding. In a matter of seconds, a torrent of frantic noise and subtle gestures results in a single fish being sold for tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Once sold, the giant tuna are heaved onto carts and wheeled into the labyrinthine inner market to the stalls of the intermediate wholesalers, the Narezushi. These are the trusted purveyors, the families who have been in this business for generations. You watch amazed as a man wields a knife that looks more like a samurai's sword, a maguro bocho, slicing through the massive fish with incredible strength and precision. Zipping through the impossibly narrow and crowded aisles are the market's signature vehicles, small motorized turret trucks, or tear. They are the sharks of this particular ocean, fast, eerily quiet, and they command absolute right-of-way. Learning to flatten yourself against a stall to dodge them is the primary survival skill at Tsukiji. It is here, in these crowded aisles, that the great chefs of Tokyo come to do their shopping. They don't just place an order over the phone. They come in person, walking the wet floors in their rubber boots, talking with their personal trusted vendors. They inspect the day's catch with a critical eye, discussing the merits of this particular sea urchin from Hokkaido versus that one, or selecting the perfect gizzard shad for the day's menu. This daily ritual, this deep relationship between chef and vendor, is the invisible foundation upon which the entire world of high-end sushi is built. For 83 years, Tsukiji was this beating, brainy heart for the sushi world. But in October of 2018, the inner market closed its doors for the last time. It moved to a new state-of-the-art and far more sterile facility called Toyosu. Urban planners still debate the move, with proponents citing the crumbling infrastructure of the old market and opponents mourning the loss of a priceless cultural landmark. While the new market is undoubtedly more efficient, many who knew the old Tsukiji feel that something of its chaotic organic soul was lost. It was the end of an era, the closing of a book on a place that was so much more than a market. It was the grand central station of the sea. You have watched sushi grow from a humble preservation method into a global culinary superstar. It sits on top of the world, a symbol of sophistication, health, and artistry. But every great success story has its consequences, and our story now must confront the difficult, uncomfortable truth that comes with this immense popularity. The worldwide voracious appetite for sushi has put a tremendous, unsustainable pressure on the oceans themselves. The final chapter of sushi's evolution is not about a new ingredient or a new technique. It's a struggle for its very survival. You are now a diner in the 21st century, and for the first time when you look at a sushi menu, you have to ask a difficult question: where did this come from and what is the cost? Not the price on the menu, but the hidden ecological cost. The poster child for this crisis is the magnificent bluefin tuna. For decades, it has been the undisputed king of the sushi bar, the ultimate prize. But its popularity has pushed it to the brink. You have seen how the demand for its fatty belly, the toro, exploded with the advent of refrigeration. That demand never slowed down. Advanced commercial fishing fleets using spotter planes and massive nets have become so ruthlessly efficient that wild bluefin populations have plummeted. Sushi became so popular that we were in danger of eating its main character out of existence. In response to this looming crisis, humanity turned to a solution that is as old as farming itself: aquaculture. If you can't find enough in the wild, you grow it yourself. This movement began in earnest with fish like salmon. Remember the Norwegians who convinced Japan to eat their farmed salmon raw. That project was a blueprint. Today, a huge portion of the salmon yellowtail and sea bream you find at a sushi restaurant comes from massive fish farms where they are raised from eggs in large ocean pens. This provides a steady year-round supply that has in many ways made affordable sushi possible. But aquaculture is not a simple magic bullet. The problem with farming big carnivorous fish is that they have expensive taste. They don't want to eat kale. They want to eat smaller fish. So to feed the farmed salmon and tuna fishing boats must catch immense quantities of wild forage fish like sardines and anchovies, which can disrupt the natural food web. The farms themselves can also create pollution from waste and excess feed. The holy grail of this field has been the attempt to farm the bluefin tuna itself. This is an incredible scientific challenge. But after more than 30 years of painstaking research, scientists at Japan's Kindai University achieved a breakthrough. They became the first in the world to raise bluefin tuna from eggs hatched in captivity, creating a fully closed-cycle farmed fish. It is a monumental achievement, but the process is still incredibly expensive and difficult to scale. This brings us to the modern debate that every sushi lover must face. Is it better to eat a wild-caught fish trusting in government regulations to manage the fisheries sustainably? Or is it better to eat a farmed fish trusting in technology to solve the problem of supply? It's the most heated debate in the modern seafood world, a choice between imperfect options. Out of this confusion, a new movement has been born: the rise of the conscious consumer and the sustainable sushi chef. People are starting to use guides like the Monterey Bay Aquarium's Seafood Watch to inform their choices, avoiding critically endangered species like bluefin tuna and opting for more abundant alternatives. Some creative chefs are even championing invasive species sushi, using fish like the destructive lionfish as a topping that is both delicious and ecologically responsible. Ordering sustainable sushi is the new way to show you're a true connoisseur. It says, I not only have refined taste, but I've also done my homework and would prefer that my grandchildren know what a tuna is. You look at that glistening piece of toro on the menu. A generation ago, it was a symbol of pure indulgence. Today, it is a symbol of a complex and difficult choice. The humble origins of sushi were rooted in the simple human need for survival. Now, ironically, the future of sushi is rooted in the survival of the fish themselves. You've grappled with the difficult questions of sustainability, the weighty responsibility that comes with being a global food phenomenon. This forces you to consider a path that for most of sushi's history would have been unthinkable. It's a question that is both a return to the past and a leap into the future. What if you took the fish out of sushi, not just sometimes, but entirely? For centuries, sushi was all about the fish. The idea of fish-free sushi would have seemed like a car without an engine. But modern chefs have proven that you can power this vehicle with some very delicious and innovative new fuels. This idea is not entirely without precedent. You have to remember that simple vegetable rolls have been a quiet, humble part of the sushi tradition for centuries. You take a bite of a kappa maki. It's just a crisp spear of cucumber and rice wrapped in nori. Its name is said to come from the kappa, a mythical green water-loving goblin from Japanese folklore that adores cucumbers. It's clean, it's refreshing, and it's the perfect palate cleanser. Or you might have a kampyo maki, filled with sweet and savory simmered strips of gourd, or an oshinko maki, with the salty crunch of pickled daikon radish. These have always been there, the dependable supporting actors on the sushi stage. But the modern vegetable sushi movement is something else entirely. It's not about simple palate cleansers anymore. It's about taking vegetables and elevating them to the starring role, applying the same artistry technique and seriousness that was once reserved only for the finest bluefin tuna. You are now in a high-end contemporary restaurant that might not serve any fish at all. The chefs here are exploring the vast untapped potential of the plant kingdom. They are deconstructing vegetables and rebuilding them into new stunning forms. You see the chef take a sliver of deep red topping and place it on a ball of rice. It looks exactly like a prize piece of tuna. But he tells you that it's a Roma tomato, which has been blanched, peeled, seeded, and then marinated for hours in soy sauce, mirin, and kombu seaweed to give it a deep umami flavor and a shockingly similar texture. You see a piece that looks like glistening grilled eel lacquered with a sweet sauce. It turns out to be a slice of Japanese eggplant, perfectly roasted to a creamy consistency. Modern vegan sushi has gotten so creative that you sometimes need a field guide to know what you're eating. That piece of eel you're enjoying might have been an eggplant in a previous life. Chefs are using every technique in the culinary handbook. Mushrooms are smoked to give them a savory, meaty depth. Bell peppers are fire-roasted and peeled to create a silky, sweet topping. Thinly sliced avocado is wrapped around a roll to create a creamy exterior, while sweet potato tempura inside provides a hot, crunchy contrast. Some of the most innovative chefs are even using things like konjac, a plant-based gel, to create replicas of shrimp or squid that mimic their unique, chewy textures. This creative explosion addresses the sustainability crisis head-on, but its appeal goes far beyond that. It's a new frontier of flavor and texture. It's often lighter, brighter, and plays with a different palette of tastes. And it has led to one of the great philosophical debates in the modern food world. Can a dish without fish truly be called sushi? The debate cuts to the very heart of sushi's identity. Does the word inherently mean fish, or does it refer to the one single ingredient that has been constant throughout this entire 2,000-year journey, from the sour discarded rice of the Mekong River to the perfectly seasoned pillow in a Tokyo temple of gastronomy? That ingredient, of course, is the vinegared rice, the sherry. Many now argue that as long as the dish is centered on this special rice, it is in fact sushi. It's a testament to the cuisine's incredible flexibility. Having conquered the world with fish, it is now beginning a new conquest, armed with nothing more than rice seaweed and the limitless potential of the vegetable garden. It's a delicious win-win, a path forward that is both sustainable and endlessly creative. And so here you are at the end of this long, winding road which began 2,000 years ago in the humid quiet of a Southeast Asian river delta. The next time you sit down at a sushi bar or pick up a plastic container of rolls from the grocery store, I want you to pause for just a moment and consider the immense invisible history packed into that single perfect bite. A single piece of modern nigiri has more backstory than a comic book superhero. It's been through multiple origin stories, reboots, and dramatic costume changes over the centuries. Look at that simple piece of tuna on rice. That pillow of glistening rice you're about to eat is the direct descendant of a sour, mushy, inedible paste that was once thrown away. Its pleasant tang comes not from months of fermentation, but from rice vinegar, a brilliant time-saving hack invented in 17th century Edo. The very word sushi has evolved. The modern characters often used for it, shoshi, were chosen for their auspicious meanings of longevity, and to officiate, a far cry from its original meaning of pickled fish. The slice of fish on top, so fresh and cool, is a luxury that would have been an impossibility for nearly all of sushi's history. Its existence on your plate is a testament to the bounty of Edo Bay, the invention of refrigeration, and a global logistics network that can now fly a fish from the other side of the world to your plate in a day. You might dip it in soy sauce, but in a traditional stall, the chef would have brushed his own special blend, his nikiri, on for you, a polite way of saying, "Don't you dare drown my masterpiece in a salty brown swimming pool." That tiny dab of wasabi between the fish and rice is a ghost, the faint echo of a time when its spicy antimicrobial kick was a crucial defense against a world of sickness. You might be eating it at a counter watching a masterful chef in a tradition that stretches back to the street stalls of Edo and was elevated to a high art by modern masters. Or you might be plucking it from a conveyor belt, an idea born in a beer factory in Osaka. You might be eating a classic piece of nigiri, a form perfected by Hanaya Yohei, or a creative inside-out roll with avocado, a cross-cultural marvel invented in Los Angeles to welcome a skeptical new audience. That it exists for you to eat in Seattle or London or Dubai is thanks to pioneers who saw a future for this food far beyond its home. This brings us to the ultimate question, the final debate for sushi's future, its identity. As it continues to absorb new ingredients, new ideas, and new cultural influences, at what point might it cease to be Japanese? Or is its true genius, its ultimate identity, found in its infinite capacity for adaptation? It has shown a remarkable ability to transform itself, to survive from preservation method to tax payment, from street food to high art, from a local delicacy to the world's first truly global cuisine. It started as a way to not starve in a swamp and ended up as a high-fashion food that people pay hundreds of dollars for. That's quite a career path. Every bite is a taste of that journey, a testament to human ingenuity, patience, and our endless, wonderful desire to make something delicious. And so, our long journey through time comes to a gentle close. The story that began with the slow, patient rhythm of seasonal fermentation has now been told, its final shape formed, and its last flavors savored. The bustling energy of the Edo street stall fades, the quiet reverence of the master's counter softens into a memory, and the vibrant, chaotic hum of the great Tsukiji market recedes into the peaceful silence of the night. All that history, all those centuries of struggle and innovation and artistry now rests distilled into the simple, clean memory of a perfect bite. Allow the echo of that story to settle, to become a soft, warm weight that helps ease you down into your own well-deserved rest. There are no more facts to learn, no more timelines to trace. The currents of history now flow into the slow, deep currents of your sleep. Let the images of the journey drift and dissolve, becoming the substance of your own quiet dreams. The story is over. It is time to rest. Good night.